See you later, Danabo. Welcome, everybody. Hope you're all having a wonderful Friday. I want to thank everybody for using their Friday night to, instead of spending it with friends, family, to instead go on the internet and talk to people they disagree with. Everyone's favorite activity. I know everyone will, of course, be extremely civil. First, I'm going to go through the basic rules. The first rule is that you don't violate Twitch terms of service. That means things like no gore, no slurs, nothing that could get the channel removed for your conduct. If you are too unfamiliar with those Twitch terms of service, you can send me a DM or Danabo in DM, and they will basically give you just a few pointers or things to avoid, but you should all be fine. Besides that, don't attack people's immutable characteristics. That means don't go after people's race, don't go after people's gender, stuff of that sort. I know that this is a panel of a lot of people, even though we have a lot of time to discuss the issues, and so it can be quite difficult to try to move yourself into the conversation. And so if you're having trouble, if you raise your hand, I will give you a thumbs up and I'll write your name down and I'll make sure that eventually I stop the conversation. We move it over to you so you have some time to speak. But please use that as a last resort, not a first resort, if possible. I will also say that my biggest rule is that when I am talking, nobody else is talking. My priority as a moderator is just to moderate the conversation. I will not be trying to inject my opinion. As much as possible, I would like to remove my bias, but I am biased as a person. I'm not going to pretend not to be, but I will do my best to be an unbiased moderator. Is there any question about today's rules or anything like that? No? Wonderful. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by allowing everybody to introduce themselves.
Thanks, Devin.
And so I'm going to start in the top right-hand corner with Jangles.
Hello, everyone. My name is Justin. I go by Jangles Science Lad on the internet. I make YouTube videos very infrequently, and I've been on here once or twice before, but it's been a while. I'm nice and rusty, so go ahead and lower your expectations. But
Wonderful.
We're gonna have I'm here to have a good time, more so than anything else.
I got my tetanus shot. I'll be fine. I'm going to throw it over to Actual Jake.
Hi, I'm Actual Jake. I'm often a guy in a corn suit. We do leftist stuff on Twitch. It's a lot of fun. We have a really chill atmosphere. I think you'd like it.
Wonderful. Now I'm going to throw it over to the former Joe Lewis. You've changed your Twitch name. Is that correct?
That is correct. So now you can find me now and always at twitch.tv/Dumadamu. Please, if able, address me however you would like within that. Duma's fine, Damu's fine. But if you switch up every once in a while and say Joe, I'm not gonna slip up and call you the C word. So with that being said, I'm glad to be here. Always fun to come on these. It's been a minute. So
can I ask a question about that real quick? You mentioned on Twitter, this is just a Twitch thing, or is this like a more of your life thing?
Yeah, it's okay. Like on like internet persona, like it's kind of like within that, but obviously like in private situations with all of you, like you can call me. That's totally fine.
Okay. I just want.
Wonderful. Yeah. Now I'm going to throw it over to a new guest, Kenny.
Oh no!
I cannot hear you. I believe you're muted.
Oh no! He was having some trouble before.
Okay, I can keep going, and I think Danabo will be able to help you out. I'm gonna throw it over to last username.
Hey, I am last username, liberal anarchist, also known as Econarchy on YouTube. The most radical kind of liberal there is. Good to be here.
Happy to have you here, last username. Now I'm gonna throw it over to
edgy,
Merrick.
Huh?
Howdy, y'all. I am Merrickville. I am,
I
guess, a streamer again. We've been getting back into it in the last couple of weeks, doing it pretty regularly again. But, you know, formerly was just a Twitter person. I am a sex worker. I am a lefty. We talk about a lot of issues. We talk about the war on drugs. We talk about feminism. We talk about sex work. A lot of history stuff on my channel. And I am very happy to be back here. So, yeah, I'm very excited. We have a great bunch of panel people today. Yeah.
We have a great cast as always. Yeah. I'm gonna throw it over now to Superpower Broadcasting.
Yeah, thanks, Dylan. It's good to be here. I'm Kevin Castley. I run the channel Superpower Broadcasting. I stream every day to Twitch and upload content to YouTube as well. You can also find me on Twitter at Kevin Castley. I'm a liberal hawk, anti-theist, and liberal unilateralist. And I talk a lot about foreign policy, geopolitics, morality, and, you know, social issues as well, through a liberal lens, and economically liberal / center right. So good to be here. Looking forward to the debate. Thank you.
Happy to have you here. And I'm going to throw it over now to Taft.
Great. My name is Taff, or Taft House. You can call me April if that's easier. I post sexy pictures online and share controversial opinions, usually from like a moderate sort of center-right viewpoint. So yeah, looking forward to the discussion today. I think it'll be fun. I can't hear Dylan.
Yeah. Wait, I can't hear Dylan.
Well, now he can't hear me. Okay, so I muted myself. Now I'm having audio issues.
Yeah.
This sometimes happen. I think we'll see if Danabo can help you out. We see if we can get it resolved if possible. We're gonna go into the first topic, and yeah, I can't hear you. And I'll see if Danabo can help you out a little bit more, and get the audio problem resolved. If not, well, we can always reschedule and try to figure out another day. So we're gonna go into the first topic. The first topic on today's agenda is the banning of Russia today. We're seeing a lot of countries react to Russian state media across the globe. Some by, I think the UK is targeting their licensing in the United Kingdom, and other countries are targeting Russian state media to a whole host of different avenues. We've seen RT America basically closed down for the first time in a very long time. After I believe they didn't have their licensing removed by the government, but basically they were getting dropped by cable providers, I believe. So my question to all of you is, what do you think private companies like YouTube and Twitch should do about Russia today? Do you think they should ban them? Do you think they should get rid of them? What do you think they should do in reaction to the Russian invasion of Ukraine and them pushing the Russian position on their platforms? We're going to start with Kevin Castley, because I'm sure he's very opinionated on this issue.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, great. So Russia today getting banned from Twitch, YouTube, and other platforms, basically across the Western world. It's something that I and my community have been calling for a long time. Like, I mean, it's in some ways shocking to see it finally happened, because it turned out it took a war on 44 million people, Russia routinely bombing hospitals and doing all sorts of atrocities for their propaganda network to finally be shut down after, over a decade. It's the sort of thing that when we look at the Cold War, and we are in a Cold War with Russia, we've been in a Cold War with fascist Russia since the 90s, in fact. The old Cold War never really ended. Russia never really stopped viewing the West as an enemy. The only difference that happened was that the Kremlin swapped out communism for fascism. And so in the new information war, they're actually, despite us being on their border with military units and us having the battle lines in their court, they've been in our sphere, within our borders, for a very long time, since the 90s in the information war. This goes back to Alexander Dugin and the foundation of geopolitics, which is required rating for Russian intelligence. And they've been trying to undermine us ever since. I think for us to finally do the slightest move of just simply shutting down their propaganda networks is a move in the right direction, and it signifies that we're finally taking the threat seriously and that we won't tolerate the Kremlin's disinformation anymore. So I approve of it.
I'm going to throw it now over to last username.
So, I mean, yeah, RT is propaganda for sure. The idea that we can shut down their propaganda network just seems kind of infeasible to me. I mean, we might be able to ban them from YouTube, but, the purpose of that propaganda, at least at this point, is going to be it's propaganda for the Russian people, right? It's not going to be propaganda I think Russia's reputation in the rest of the world is pretty much shot at this point. I'm not worried about Russia brainwashing everyone else. It seems like, public sentiment against them has pretty much decided that Russia is the bad guy. So it really, RT, is just about the Russians. And if we decide to sort of plug our ears and just stop listening to Russian propaganda, we're just really cutting off a useful way to understand what's going on in Russia and what what is driving them, and what's happening with Russian culture and what makes the Russians tick. And there's no real advantage to that. So I think I don't see any harm to letting people outside of Russia hear RT. It's not going to hurt them. It's not going to brainwash them, but it might give them some insight into how we got into the situation and how we might get out of it.
Okay, Kenny, I have good news. I saw your light turn green. I think you might have fixed your audio.
Yeah, can you hear me, guys?
Now I can hear you. Yes, we can all hear you.
Perfect. Perfect.
You can introduce yourself. The first, I'll also allow you to say your statement on the first topic, your intro to it, and it's about basically YouTube and Twitch banning Russia Today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Kenny Shu. I'm an author, political commentator. I'm the author of the new book, An Inconvenient Minority, which is about how Asian Americans debunk the critical race theory narrative. And my new organization is called Color Us United, called colorusunited.org, where we advocate for a race-blind America, colorblind America. I know those are fighting words, but I'm excited to be on here.
Wonderful. Do you want to give your intro to the first topic? The first topic has to do with YouTube, platforms like YouTube and Twitch banning Russia Today.
Yeah, no, I don't. Look, if we have YouTube banning Russia Today, why isn't Twitter banning, the Chinese state media? Or, why you can go down this rabbit hole forever, or North Korean dictatorial state media that's going on, or Iranian state media. I mean, you're supposed to allow state media to give themselves a voice. Just it's kind of the epitome of moral arrogance to say, okay, we're so good that, and by the way, YouTube is an American company, and I don't think many people in this chat think America's, the most exceptional, greatest country in the world. But kind of by banning something like Russia Today, you're basically saying, yeah, my American viewpoint is so good that we're going to ban all viewpoints that are antithetical to that, such as Russia's.
Okay. I'm going to keep going around the room so we can all get our intro statements in. I'm going to throw it now over to Taft.
Great. Yeah, I'll echo some of the things that have been already said by other panelists. I think that removing Russia Today from YouTube is just going to push the content elsewhere and into echo chambers. The kinds of people that are susceptible to this sorts of propaganda are going to find it, and they're going to find it as long as there is, free speech on the internet. But we want to be able to control where they're finding it and how it's balanced with good information that is presenting an opposing viewpoint. So one thing that I think has been really good in this conflict is the Biden's administration's ability to counter Russian propaganda and to set straight lies and to control the narrative. And the way they do that is by honestly, addressing claims made by Russia, not just trying to paper over them or hide them. I think that's really the best solution, is to counter propaganda with good, valid information, and not just to try to pretend that nobody has the kind of viewpoints that are inconvenient. As for whether or not it's a good idea, it might be a good business move, frankly, because a lot of people are sort of in the mindset where they just don't want to see anything Russian. Even if I think in the long run, it's probably just going to fracture and divide and create chaos long term. So that's my position.
Okay. I'm now going to throw it over to Joe Lewis.
Yeah, I guess my take is pretty simple. Businesses can refuse services from foreign governments, and this includes news syndicates. This is something that I think should be allowed for companies to do.
I wanted to be muted.
Take moral positions on it, but
thanks, buddy.
It doesn't matter how many angry, raging fists you do to these companies; they're gonna just do it anyway. I wish I wish my take was a little bit more nuanced, but it's just we know what we're dealing with RT. They are clearly biased and misleading and spread propaganda, and YouTube and any other company is within their rights to deny them access to their service.
Okay. I'm now going to throw it over to Merrick.
So there's a couple of things going on here. I mean, I think first and foremost, I agree that, Russia Today is really just a propaganda outlet. I do think that private companies, they do have the ability to not host a channel if they don't want to host it. That's true. I guess my concerns, like, I don't really have a problem with the moral or ethical implication of removing Russia Today. I think the thing that I am more concerned about is it more effective to simply purge them from YouTube and Twitter, YouTube and Twitch, or is it actually more effective to keep them and label them exactly what they are? I think that existing in spaces that are adjacent to a lot of tanky and a lot of gray zone spaces online, you do see a lot of very conspiratorial thinking, and I am a little bit concerned that just purging them makes them more sympathetic to that crowd, and it really plays into a lot of the conspiratorial thinking. Would it not just be more effective to keep them and label them as state propaganda? I'm not really certain, but really for me, this is the pertinent question. I think that they're just clearly Russian. It's clearly a place to show Russian disinformation. So I don't know.
Okay,
maybe net positive to remove them. But I do think that if we are going to remove them, that we should probably put labels on the people who either worked for them or the people who still continue. Oh wait, are they shutting down completely? Actually, they're shutting down completely, aren't they?
RT America
RT
is shutting
America.
down. Yeah.
Okay, I think that people who work for other parts of Russia Today should probably have to be labeled on Twitter as state affiliates, the same way we have that for like people like Chinese delegates, or that we see sometimes, or like for American government officials. I think those people should have to be labeled as Russian state officials. But yeah, I mean, I guess in the end, it's probably good to take Russian propaganda offline.
Okay. I will also say that cheating during today's discussion is not allowed, including having such an adorable feline. That biases the audience against everyone else. I just wanted to make that clear.
I'm sorry, this is my child, and even if I try to yeet him, he will come back. So we're stuck looking at the cat. I apologize.
Yeah, I closed the door so the dog wouldn't come in because I didn't want to sway anybody.
He's a man of virtue.
Yeah.
Okay.
Speaking of a man.
Scream.
Okay, speaking of a man of virtue, I'm going to throw it over to actual Jake.
Oh, okay. I thought I was a cat man or whatever. Heart of a cat guy? Wasn't that a canon
Heart
here?
Of a cat.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's
okay.
canon.
I'm kind of with Joe, or I mean, I'm sorry. I forgot. It says it on the on Discord still. That's why. Anyway, sorry. I feel similar. It's kind of like we're at the state where corporations have a lot of control over the way we communicate, and that's not necessarily a good thing, but it's the facts of the matter, and that's like what you get for capitalism when we, it's part of the side effect of that. I don't hate the idea of labeling stuff. Part of me sees that as a good thing for like normies interacting with it, but again, I think that just helps. I don't think there's a way to handle them without making them kind of maintain conspiratorial thinking when you kind of are already in that, because like you see like how demonetization and being banned and stuff is often used to sort of like rally support. Same stuff happens with we've been labeled as misinformation. So I don't know if that's the answer. It's not a terrible way to go with it. I don't really know what the right answer is, but I do know that fewer eyes, like we have such a short-term memory for stuff, and then the way news cycles work, it feels like, I don't know, if RT shuts down, we're gonna be like who Omega Lol in chat when it's brought up in 3 years, you know what I mean? Like, because it'll be just dead because it won't be able to maintain eyeballs. So this is probably the best way to go about it, is if you want to get rid of them. I mean, the ethical things are something else, but it's effective. I guess that's my take.
Okay, and the last person to wrap up intros before we move into an open discussion period is going to be Jangles.
Yeah, so anytime a topic like this gets brought up, I do think it's always a valid question as to like, well, who gets to determine what is and is not misinformation? Who gets to determine what is and is not propaganda?
Really
but the answer to that question is never no one. They're all like, having an imperfect system is much better than having no system at all. In which case, like anybody can say anything they want without any sort of repercussions.
Dude,
so
I think this
I do think
caffeine hit me hard.
I mean, everybody here for the most part kind of agrees that
hand
RT
is,
is
like,
Russian
shaking.
propaganda. And one of the ways that their propaganda is that they'll like cater, like with their different language services, they will cater different stories to different people. The biggest example being like COVID. At home, RT took it very seriously. Get the vaccine. This is a serious disease. Absolutely do not, if you've been exposed to COVID, self-quarantine. But in other countries, like in Germany and the United States, they were promoting a bunch of like like anti-vax propaganda. They were saying it wasn't a big deal. They were saying that there's microchips in the vaccine. They were boosting all these stories to try to sow disinformation abroad like that. So propaganda like this, propaganda isn't just tricking people into thinking something that isn't true. Oftentimes it is appealing to what they want to be true in the first place. It's not tricking people. It's like they're telling them what they want to hear. In that case, facts are neutral. Like propaganda has nothing to do with the truth. They're going to tell you what you want to hear.
Yeah.
So countering propaganda with the truth isn't going to be effective because the truth was never what people were seeking in the first place. They sought what they wanted to hear. And in that case, I think banning is like the only thing you can do.
That's why I moved from
people are
here
going
to
to still
here
be able to
because
access
Discord
RT in
does it
other
by,
ways. But that's not the point, right? The point is
fucking
not to like say that no one can ever access this information
alphabetical.
ever.
I'm trying to
It's
listen
about
to
putting
Jackal at the
enough
same time, sorry.
barriers to make it more inconvenient for more people to be able to access this disinformation. It's not. Is it the best option? I don't know. I don't think there is a perfect option, but I do think it is a good one that will have a net positive effect on the world.
Okay, I do want to say for Jangles, if you could turn up your volume a little bit, that would be greatly appreciated. That's the first thing I wanted to say. Second thing I wanted to say is to everybody at home before we go into an open conversational period is that please do not assume anybody here is an expert on the issues. These is a culmination of many different people. Please get resources from other sources as well. Do not expect random people on the internet to give you your worldview. Please do your own research and go draw from other sources as well. We live in the age of freedom of information of the internet. Please make use of it instead of just looking at Twitter memes.
Is that a new disclaimer? Because I really like it.
I've been trying to do it more and more, but sometimes I forget.
I appreciate you.
It's a good disclaimer for sure.
Yeah, that's actually really good.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
So we're going to start with the open dialogue period. And one last thing for everybody talking today, I'm not going to tell you to be nice to each other, but I would just say, always be nice. Make sure your favorite spice. You get more flies with honey. Okay, wonderful. Who wants to start us off for the open period? Kevin?
I'm down.
Throw it over to Kevin. I know Kevin's excited.
Yeah, no, I am excited. Let's go. So I got a response to last username. You said in your opening about how it'd be important to keep, or that there could be some utility in keeping Russia Today around on these platforms so that we can see what Russia's up to or what the sort of mood is in the Kremlin or whatnot. The problem that I have with that is that Russia Today doesn't exist to give you a window into what's going on in Russia. It exists for foreign export. It was founded for foreign export. If you want to watch what the Kremlin is saying to their own people, you watch like Rossi 1 and get it translated into English. You'd watch Russian state TV for domestic consumption. RT is specifically funded to the tune of about $300 million a year to basically sow discord and brainwash the youth in the West, America, Canada, the UK, France, etc., to basically drive a wedge on various social issues, to hype up the far left, the far right, to basically wither away our social fabric and amplify the divisions. And so I guess my sort of question would be, or my sort of response would be, because we're able to just go online and search up their own state or whatever, we can just watch, you know, Russia 1 or whatever. Why should Twitch and YouTube keep these guys around? Because the thing is, we're not talking about individuals who just happen to agree with Putin or like Putin. We're talking about a particular government that we know is basically broadcasting its foreign policy and its connivances against our world. And of course, they don't allow us to do that there. So,
well, okay, so I didn't know that. I suppose maybe it would be better than a potential compromise is if I was YouTube, I might block RT and instead replace it with the Russian version, like you said, whatever it's called, the domestic version of the propaganda. I don't know if it's in English or not, but
well, it's not in English. The problem is they don't show that to the rest of the world because it's specifically only like give their people their propaganda. Like they have a different
Yeah.
tune for the West, right? Like they have a different thing that they tell leftists in America versus what they tell the people in Russia, right? Different message to different groups. So they're not actually, it's like North Korea. They're not really interested in broadcasting here. They'll have a different organization do that, like RT, where they'll brand it. They'll hire people that sound British or whatever, people that sound American. They'll get Larry King on. But like you're never going to find Russia One on Twitch or YouTube because they're only interested in Russia. So.
Well, but you could, if you
get
the feed, you could put it on YouTube, right? Russia's not going to put it on there, but YouTube could get it.
Throw it over to you, then Tav.
But I'd say even knowing that about RT, I still probably, if I was YouTube, I still probably wouldn't ban it, because if I do that, I'm kind of opening a can of worms where now I have to decide which foreign organizations or governments are allowed to be on YouTube at all. And if Russia isn't, then it seems like there's going to be a whole lot of other nations that aren't either, and I'm going to have some huge, complicated policy for deciding that. It's probably something I'd choose to stay out of and just have a very simple allow anything policy if I was YouTube.
But YouTube's a multi-billion-dollar company, one of the biggest in the world. You could hire people. You wouldn't have to do it yourself, because otherwise what you're saying is if you're YouTube, you're okay with letting Putin take advantage of you. That sounds weak, personally.
I'm okay with letting lots of people take advantage of me, if I'm a communication service.
Okay, great, wonderful.
Okay, it's going to be Merrick, Taft, then Jake.
Oh, shit, I might not remember.
So I guess one thing that I want to add on to what Superpower Broadcasting, what your name was, Kevin, right?
Kevin Castley, yeah.
Right. So something that I want to add on to what Kevin is saying is that he's talking about how Russia shows different things to their people that they show here in America. One of the things that we actually know about Russia's propaganda strategy is that they will put out conflicting narratives, because they're actually not really concerned with pushing a coherent narrative, because a big part of propaganda is not necessarily sticking with a certain rhetorical strategy. A lot of it is like just sowing doubt. So there actually is a willingness to put out conflicting narratives, because just that act of sowing doubt is enough to help weaken things and is enough to sow chaos. And I think another thing we were talking about when you're saying like, well, if I was YouTube, I would have to start litigating like which countries, but the thing is, like, you don't really, because you're a corporation, and unfortunately, whether for better or for worse, as a giant corporation, there's not really anyone holding their feet to the fire saying, well, now that you got rid of RT, now we have a list of all of the other countries and we got to start going down that. And they don't answer to other foreign governments. So I don't think that we're actually likely to see much pressure on them to do this with other foreign governments. I actually very much doubt that we're going to see this at all. I think another thing to consider is that Russia today is not the only media coming out of Russia. Like, they have other outlets that are still existing on YouTube. So those are just some things to consider.
Yeah, I have a question for Kenny, because Kenny, in your opening, you mentioned how.
Would it be okay if we could have Taft and Jake comment first?
Sure.
Okay, wonderful. Taft?
Okay.
There's actually research into this regarding the effect of censorship on radical beliefs. And what we find is that centralized censorship, especially, that is censorship from the platform, causes people to be more certain, more confident with their radical beliefs, not less. And it's because these people tend to go where they can find information that is going to confirm their belief. And if that takes them to platforms where there's no dissent at all, their certainty of beliefs actually increases. So I agree with people in the panel who are saying that these companies like YouTube can ban Russia today. That's within their rights. We agree. That's part of the private structure of, internet infrastructure that allows them to moderate their platforms as they see fit. But I think what we're disagreeing about is whether or not it's productive to do so. And I think the evidence that it is productive to do so is pretty weak. And in fact, there's evidence on the other side that might say that it's actually harmful. And so when it comes to this question of whether or not Russia today should be banned, I'm not really concerned with this feel-good policy of we ban them and then we are striking back against the Russia, because that, again, feels good, but I don't think it's borne out in the evidence of that being an effective policy.
Okay, Jake.
Well, I don't think it's a. I guess I'll answer you and then go back. I don't think there's a. We're not talking about like radicals getting more radicalized. That's not like what people
Isn't that the concern?
No,
the
it's not.
propaganda?
No, it's not the concern. The
You're
concern.
not concerned about people being propagandized.
I'm not concerned about people that radicals becoming more radical. What I'm concerned about are people becoming radicals because they weren't yet.
Place.
They weren't yet, and then that's the problem with propaganda is people becoming them, not becoming more them. So it's not the individual radicals' power level. It's that there's lots of them. That is the problem, because then they're telling their friends, they're telling their family dumb things that hurt people. So that's the problem. But as far as the other thing, like, do corporations have an ethical duty to limit propaganda though? Because it's not like the Wild West. I feel like if you have a corporation, you have some sort of responsibility. Like, even under just strict capitalism, you have a responsibility to like the consumer base and the country that you serve, right? The idea, this sort of like noble business owner ideal that a lot of capitalists like, right? Which it should work like that. Shouldn't you have like, ought they not try to limit the harm they do throughout whatever they offer on their platform,
agree.
right?
Yeah,
that wasn't
try
just
to
at
limit
you,
the
but
harm.
yeah.
Yeah. No, I think we're all in agreement for the most part. I don't think anyone's here is like a Russia fan. They're like, yeah,
no, not a Russia fan. But last username specifically was like, well, we should just allow everybody. That's the best way to go. Like, I kind of disagree.
Okay, hold on. So I need to put a little park on this, because you guys are saying Russia Today is like totally, completely bad. Now let me ask you guys a question. Would you watch Fox News or Russia Today?
Fox News.
Fox News.
Because at least with Hannity, you got a 50% chance that he's right or a 50% chance he's wrong, because he's just doing a partisan sort of thing. With Russia Today, you've got 100% chance that it's a foreign enemy state, just like Chinese state media, conniving against your country, and that what they're saying is disingenuous to try to undermine you. I got a question for you, Kenny.
So,
in your opening statement, you mentioned Chinese state TV.
Wait. That was an incredible segue.
One second, Kevin. You gotta let Kenny respond.
Okay.
You'll have a question for him. Okay.
Okay. Look, so you need to acknowledge the fact that people aren't completely dumb. Like, they don't just put in an input and it just comes in the output, and they believe 100% of what they say, okay? You need to acknowledge the fact that, hey, maybe we could use some aspect or appropriate or whatever, some aspect of what Russia thinks about the U.S. Because we're here in America talking about how the U.S. is racist, about how the U.S. has this issue, this problem, and I'm telling you, Putin's saying the same thing on his side. They're saying the U.S. is racist. The U.S. does have that problem. And in that case, you and Russia Today probably agree. You know who else is saying that? CCTV.
Putin's racist, dude. Putin's
CCTV.
CCTV?
CCTV in China is saying the exact same thing about America. They're saying America is in decline.
Oh boy.
Hold on. They're saying they hate America. They're saying Americans are tearing apart themselves, everything like that. And in that case, you would have some agreement with CCTV. So in the sense that, or if you believe that America is also a racist country, you would believe a similar thing that Russia Today is also saying and CCTV is also saying. So these companies have some beliefs that we may actually need to hear, at the very least hear. And insofar as that's true, it's not worth going through the perspective of banning something if you have.
Bro, where do they find the clowns at? Is there a clown store?
What the world thinks. But please go ahead, Kevin.
Purchase them?
Yeah, I had a question for you, because in your opening you mentioned, well, what about Chinese state affiliated media? And I just want to make sure that you're not just doing a deflection or whataboutism. I want to just ask you, would you take a deal where social media companies and stuff don't platform Russia Today, and in exchange we also don't platform CCTV? Like on my show, Go Gang Rising, we react to CCTV sometimes, CGN and stuff. They're really bad. Like, they're on the same level. We're in a cold war with both countries. I'm fine with getting rid of both. Would you take that deal? Or do you, like, because some people say that, but then they just want to protect RT. Would you be fine with shutting down both?
No, I wouldn't be fine with shutting down either in this country.
So
To
it was
me,
just
it's
a
like banning.
whataboutism to deflect from the pressure on RT. Okay, great. I
No, no,
just
no,
thought
no,
we'd put
no.
that
let
on
I'm
him
record.
respond.
asking. Okay, Kevin, would you ban TikTok?
Yes, I've called for TikTok to be banned like since 2020.
Oh,
basically.
Okay, wait a
Kevin,
second.
how dare you?
All right.
How dare you?
Wait,
diminish
why
the
are we
voice of
doing
a black
such things?
person
You're
in the
losing that Gen Z audience, man.
No.
Now you're banning TikTok.
No. We're Team
Now you're
Zoomer
gonna
here.
ban-
We're
yeah,
Team
you know,
Zoomer.
everybody
Relax.
calm
everything.
down.
My
Everybody-
memes,
go.
Kevin.
Okay, everybody, calm down. Okay, we're gonna lose all of our TikTok memes at Kevin's hands. But Kevin, please continue. I mean, no, Kenny, you were gonna respond to that.
Throne of
That's
lies.
okay. There you go. There you go. Once you start saying that everything created by this country necessarily is 100% wrong and 100% needs to be banned, then
I
you
never
start
said
going down
that.
a very dark road. You start
never
going
said
down a
that.
very dark road because then you're restricting yourself from international commerce. Okay,
I
Are
never
you-
said
international
everything made
commerce
in China
comes
should be
with-
banned. I said their propaganda should be banned.
Well, you also said we should ban TikTok, which is a
their
Chinese
propaganda.
state-owned company.
It's
Oh,
literally
okay, like-
spyware so
And-
that the Communist Party can see what you're up to and get your data. So
Listen,
Maybe let's save
Exactly.
Okay.
Kenny, I'm
discussion
confused.
for a later day.
I'm
Okay,
really
so
confused,
Joe
Kenny.
Lewis hasn't said anything yet. I know there's a lot of people on the list, but I want to make sure he gets a. Oh, sorry. He who shall not be named, hasn't been able to talk yet. So I want to throw it over to him. I have everybody's name written down. Don't worry.
I'm kind of confused, Kenny, on two things. The first is Fox News, so I guess we can press on that first. Do you believe Fox News is transparent on telling the difference when they go through opinion pieces and factual reporting of news? Do you think there's a very clear distinction that viewers can see?
I mean, I think Fox News is a pretty similar bias in the other direction that the New York Times has.
That's not the question I asked. I asked you if you believe that do you believe it to be easy or difficult for the average individual to discern the difference between opinion pieces on Fox News and facts reporting on Fox News?
I would say it's pretty easy.
In
Pretty
what
easy
way?
for me to do it. It says opinion at the top.
Does it? If I go to Fox News right now,
Yeah, it does. It said
Where-
it's a New York Times is an opinion page. Fox News is an opinion page too.
that's still not the question I'm asking. If I turn on Fox News right now, would an average individual, not you or I, with college degrees and able to have analysis of how news operates? I'm talking about the average
Yes,
individual.
because I know how to distinguish
and
between
what was
fact and opinion.
right? So
because
what
I
does
took,
that look like? What does that
hold
look
on,
like?
because I took
You said
sixth grade
it
fact
was
and
on that,
opinion
but like
class.
hold on, like I'll let you finish because I really want to really like.
Well, you did
pinpoint
ask him the question.
Chronic,
I
thanks for
want to
five.
give Kenny some uninterrupted
Yeah,
time
sure,
to
sure,
respond.
absolutely, go for it.
So look, you have the okay. If somebody says, "Hey, it is a fact that I think you're pretty," no, it doesn't matter if you said it's a fact that I think you're pretty. It's still your opinion, And just because somebody puts the word "this is fact," like the Washington Post says, "this is fact" all the time, and then they put an opinion next to the fact. I don't believe the fact that just because they say it's a fact that I believe it's a fact, because I know how to
let's-
distinguish.
Let's pinpoint. I can pinpoint this a little bit better.
I don't want to.
Do you-
1 second.
Yeah.
I just want to be clear. Kenny is taking the position that most of you are not taking, so I want to make sure a pile-on doesn't happen. So I want to make sure that we don't like all jump on him at the same time, since he's taking a different position than most of the people on here, except for I think last username. So I just want to make sure we have like decent like.
I'm
back
just
and
trying
forth.
to see where you're going with this, Duma. So please.
Yeah, I'm trying to understand why you use Fox News in your comparison to RT, because I'm not exactly sure if the average individual can tell the difference between facts reporting on Fox News and opinion-based pieces. I can give you an example. Tucker Carlson is one of the biggest individuals in conservative media. Full stop. A lot of people watch his content. People watch his content as a means of getting their news. And this is just something refutable to be true. So my question to you is, do you think Fox News should do a better approach to people like Tucker Carlson? And then you can maybe extend that into your arguments concerning RT and PCTV.
I have no idea about Fox News' business operations, but the reason why I made the comparison between Fox News and RT initially, which I asked Kevin about, and also all of you, was because a significant portion of you, I believe, I don't know, I may be wrong, but I do believe that most of you probably distrust Fox News. And most of you also probably distrust RT. But
Well,
I don't think any
why
of you
would
want
you
to ban
believe?
Fox News.
Not to
Unless
cut
you
you
Yeah,
Yeah,
off,
because
maybe
Ken.
maybe I'm
Why
old
would
fashioned.
you-
I want my
Fox News is
propaganda
organic.
not to be
Jangles,
taken over
you
by
know?
them foreigners.
Why
I
would
want
you?
American
Why would you
propaganda.
believe? Like, why would you believe that people like? Why would you believe that in terms of Fox News? I don't understand the point that you're trying to make.
Because you guys are more on the left side of the spectrum.
I'm an anarchist. Fucking
Love you.
lefties suck. I'm
I'm
in the post left
center
movement,
right.
baby. Like I
Center
so
to
let me kind of center this, like, right, because I think we're getting lost in the sauce here. Is that, do you think that there should be better disclaimers on media when there is opinion reporting and facts reporting? Do you think that there should be a better distinction between the two? And would you extend
Absolutely.
that? And would you
100%.
extend that? Would you extend that to CCTV and RT?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
Yep. So I know a lot of people want to ask Kenny questions, but there's also other people that I want to make sure get time to talk. So I'm gonna go down the list. It's ordered: Taft, Merrick, Jake, and I'm just doing Jangles in there because I can see he's I can see he's just an opinionated man, clean in his eyes. So I'm gonna throw it to Taft first.
Yeah, I mean, just going back to sort of what people are talking about, I don't think there's been like a meaningful reason put forth as to why banning this content's actually going to get the results we want. I wonder if some of the people in here, for example, actual Jake or Duma, would be okay with a policy that specifically labels it as like state affiliated media, or maybe downranks it in the algorithm. So that is to say, like, recommends it less often, but doesn't outright ban it. Therefore, we're meeting some
By the
of
way,
last usernames like requirement. Yeah. By the way.
YouTube already does that. They label all
Yeah.
state funded media with a little banner.
I'm wondering if there's like a solution that isn't outright banning it, but still allowing people to look at it, understand, what kind of propaganda is being put out by the Russians. And it's a kind of know your enemy type scenario where you want to understand that sort of thing.
They don't
and
know it's
also
their enemy.
allows people to continue to be on these platforms and not feel pushed elsewhere where they're going to end up in echo chambers that are, much more extreme than YouTube is going to be.
People still
But they don't know it's their enemy, though.
Yeah, like people
Well,
still
okay,
use.
they're going to be less able to know it's their enemy if it's totally separated.
They won't even interact with their
under-
enemy
Won't have
ever.
access to it.
That's the
No,
point.
that's
Like if
not
they
true.
Wait a minute.
No, on
Hey.
YouTube, that's not true.
Wait.
People do interact with other content, and that's because of how the algorithm works.
No,
Like,
if you-
it's less likely to show you content that's state affiliated.
But that's
Okay,
weak.
wait,
Why not just
guys.
get rid of it?
It's my turn.
Maybe.
Wait.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
explicitly have a point to make about this.
Thank you,
And
Java.
I-
And
so
Railcast. I
initially,
appreciate you
when
both.
I first responded, I was like,
Pew,
I
pew.
guess it's
30
the
months.
utility of should we label it or should we completely deplatform it. But I actually remembered that we do have studies that deplatforming actually does work. And so I think that that's actually really, really important to note, that not only is this isn't really a question of like, what do you think? It's actually a matter of we do have data that shows this. We do have data that shows that deplatforming does work. And I
How
understand
did
that
they show
your
that?
point of like pushing people into echo chambers and pushing people onto like DLive or BitChute or whatever. But I think that this is a question of utilitarian calculus of, do we want hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people to be pushed into a position of being radicalized in the first place? Or do we want 10,000 people to get a little bit crazier? And for me, I'm going to go ahead and say that the lesser of two evils is 10,000 people getting a little bit crazier if we can prevent hundreds of thousands of people from being radicalized in the first place.
I'd say
I think
so.
another
Oh,
point is, sorry, I'll be,
No, you're good.
I'm
I was just
real
gonna agree
brief.
with
I
you.
think another point is like, you specifically, you were like, what's better, Russia Today or Fox News? Like, what would you trust more? And I think the thing is, we don't even have to look at this in terms of like moral hypotheticals in a vacuum, because this isn't happening in a vacuum. Here in the United States, we have a massive portion of our media that acts as a watchdog towards Fox News. We do not have a massive portion of our media. We do not have activist groups and organizations that act as watchdogs for Russia Today. You can go online right now and you can see Russia Today people who do not tell you that they take money and work for Russia Today, presenting themselves as anti-imperialist, decolonization, communist leftists who are
How dare you
absolutely
call a house like this?
pro-imperialism. Yeah,
How dare you?
absolutely
Can I respond?
Red for life, okay?
right wing, and they lie about
we'll
what
let her
their
finish, and I'll throw it to
affiliation
you, Penny.
is. And we do not have a lot of people who go, oh, Sean Hannity, here's a list of every time Sean Hannity has lied. I can show you that. What I can't show you, and people don't know the household names of the people who work for Russia Today that tell lies to all the fucking Zoomers and all the like younger millennials who are on Twitter right now getting radicalized by these people who don't even know their actual politics. And that is so much more insidious and so much more dangerous than everyone who knows that Tucker Carlson is lying to you, because there was literally a lawsuit where Fox News argued that you cannot be expected to take the things that Tucker Carlson says on his platform seriously. There was literally a lawsuit where Fox News argued this. We do not have this for Russia Today.
Base, I
Okay,
agree with that. Yeah.
Kenny?
So
Then
here's
Jake.
my response is, we do have watchdogs for Russia Today. It's us. We are talking about Russia Today right now. We clearly understand the dangers
Not
of
the
Russia
same
Today.
scale, Kenny.
You
Not the
understand,
same scale.
and
Let him finish.
if you don't think there's enough watchdog being done on Russia Today, you can go start a watchdog against Russia Today. Okay? There's so many
Gold
media
Gang
sources that
Rising.
we think
Gold
are
Gang
false
Rising
or anything
Superpower
like that.
Project.
You can start a watchdog. It's and I'll tell you this. There was this church once that exhibited some like cultish behavior that I, used to look at a long time ago. And what happened was some of the members and people, and this was not public in the community. So what happened was some of the members of that church left the church and they started a website exposing the church for all of the abuse that it did and everything like that. And that led to a lot of other people leaving that church. That's what happens. This is what happens in a free country. People start watchdogs, people expose, people do those things. You don't have to outright ban for people to get the message.
So Kenny,
It's economies of scale.
Kenny,
We don't have the money or the
Wait,
resources.
one at a time. We're gonna go Kevin first before
Sorry,
going
my
to
bad.
Jake.
Sorry.
Okay. So Kenny, you said basically to people on this panel that you can start your own watchdog to RT. You could call it a watchdog. I have a show with my co-host Spooky Nukies. We're on episode 64 coming up this Saturday. Every Saturday night, we react to the worst foreign policy takes of the week. And
like a little
almost every
commercial.
week these days, we feature RT clips. And so now, granted, we're only reaching a few thousand people a month right now, but we're doing our best. But that doesn't mean that just because I'm doing this, that I can say now, well, therefore YouTube and Twitch should do nothing about the problem. In fact, they should have been doing this years ago. They should have been doing this even if me and Spooky Nukies didn't exist, because it's the right thing to do. And so I guess my question is, I see you talk about Chinese state-affiliated media as insidious, and I would agree with that. But why do you want to give a pass to Russia? Why do you want to deflect from Russia? It raises some questions about, is it because Putin admitted to supporting Donald Trump? Maybe it may have something to do with that. I don't know, but care to enlighten me. So.
But, okay, no, I never said prioritize Russia or prioritize China. Never said that. End of story.
Well,
Okay, well, you say you didn't want to do anything about
Can you clarify
RTs.
Can you clarify your point then, if possible, or re-clarify it?
Sorry, Jake.
Yes.
Continue.
My point is, don't ban CCTV, don't ban Russia Today, and
But
don't
you-
ban other state-sponsored news channels. Don't do that.
We
Just
ban
don't.
you.
well,
Yeah,
They ban you.
kind of on the line of Kevin here. Where
Well,
we
next,
should.
I'm sorry, Duma. Sorry, I just remembered
Yeah.
the Russian state Duma.
Sorry.
It's Jake next, then Jangles.
Oh, well, on my show, Actual Jake, with my co-host, Boots McToots, I'd be remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to let everyone know that they can subscribe at tier 1, 2, or 3 right this second. You can also use your Prime. But what else what I really wanted to get into was
Yeah, except we actually
more
react
Kenny.
to RT. So
More,
it's actually
yeah,
we
but this
react
is
to RT,
related
so
to
the pitch was
RT
relevant to
on
it.
my show, Actual Jake, with my co-host Boost McToots. We talked about what Kenny just said about how there's some sort of like, oh, we should let we should, you know, if we're a free marketplace, we should allow like Russia to have like a say in what's going on. We should like, it's not about like what Russia's like the state has to say. We're not saying ban all things from Russia. We're saying like state propaganda is not a good thing to allow in general. It makes a lot of sense not to allow it. It makes sense to suppress clear state propaganda. It doesn't take a scientist to understand it. Hey, that's propaganda. But like it does affect people. That's why propaganda is a thing that has that's a word that has stank on it for a reason. So yeah, it makes sense to suppress that shit. We care way more about like what Russians have to say, and if Russia allowed Russians to speak on their own behalf, I think maybe geopolitical things would be a little bit different right now, and we wouldn't even be having this discussion because Russian people don't seem that like all that crazy. They seem pretty normal, wouldn't you know what I mean? But like when it's filtered through like Putin's propaganda machine. Yeah, you're gonna, and frankly, I don't think if you're like a real pro-Russia guy or whatever, or if you think Russia's correct right now, I don't know why you wouldn't want the opinions of people that aren't Putin, you know what I mean, or his propaganda, like.
The babies.
Okay.
Can I ask to people who support banning RT? Would you take it further than that? And what about people, say, like streamers like, you know, Hassan, reacting to RT or just straight up regurgitating stuff right off of RT? Would you potentially?
It would be a violent. Not to cut you off.
No, but he's supporting them, and if they're just regurgitating basically the same content.
So
you wouldn't support like banning them too.
So there's a difference between being Kremlin-funded propaganda to the tune of $300 million a year versus a guy with opinions on Twitch that's actually organic. Like you can disagree.
You're okay with it if it's not funded.
If you're a foreign
by
agent and
Kremlin.
you're not disclosing your ultimate agenda, I have a problem with that. I absolutely have a problem with that. And you see a lot of these RT guys do not disclose who they're affiliated with or what their actual views are, and then they'll go and try to appeal to progressives or appeal to the alt-right or various sort of stuff to.
So anyone who's funded by the Kremlin should be banned.
If you're funded by the Kremlin and we're in a cold war with the Kremlin, RT specifically, it should be completely gone. But apart from that, look, I don't know what to tell you. I mean, they ban us. We're in a war, basically. We're not in a shooting war, but we are in an information war, and we're at a great vulnerability if we let.
Can you just answer my question? Would you ban anyone who is funded by the Kremlin from social media?
Right now, over the Ukraine thing, yes, but in the past, I would have required them to like have that note that they are affiliated and to disclose that who they're getting paid by, like what Mike Flynn failed to do when he was a Turkish agent for $500,000 and failed to register. We've seen this routinely with conservatives where they refuse to disclose their hidden agenda, basically, and it's a big problem. And I think that all of them.
Well, so how far should we go to try to find out where people are getting their funding, right? A big influencer blows up.
On my channel, I've called for a congressional hearing to investigate who's getting funded by anti-American actors, basically.
This isn't like a search for purity.
You want to know, like, maybe force Hassan to reveal his finances or something like that?
Well, too. Go ahead.
I couldn't hear any of that.
Yeah, there was multiple people talking at the same time.
Well, would you be in favor of forcing streamers like Hassan?
Okay, so I said there was multiple people at the same time, and the response from the room was to have multiple people then talk again at the same time. We're gonna go in order. Last username.
So,
wonderful.
Would you be in favor of using any sort of measures to force influencers to reveal their funding or whatever, investigate them to make sure they're not being funded by Russia? Because I assume if RT is banned, then the next step is going to look for other ways to get that propaganda out that's not as obvious, right?
So I'm not interested in going to their families and holding them hostage with guns, like any measures. That's kind of a
how far would you go? What would you be interested in doing? You said.
Well, but you said any measures. I mean, because Russia, they do.
So none at all.
Basically, if they think you're a spy, right?
So as long as you're not overtly.
I think RT should be banned. I guess like my question for you, right? To the last username, you're like you're not.
Could you answer my question first?
Yeah, no, well, okay, well, I basically did. I said that Russia Today should be banned.
It's so weird disagreeing with like all three.
And presumably the next step is that Russia's going to look for slightly more covert ways to fund propaganda and get it to Western audiences. How far would you do any sort of investigation on that, and how would you do it?
Well, simple. Okay, great. There's a mechanics to that, basically. What you would set up is a body You could have it, U.S. intelligence advisors, etc., whatever, hearings, etc., interviews under oath, people testifying under oath, anybody that where there's reasonable cause to believe that they might actually be funded by the Kremlin. For example, I did investigate. I called Jimmy Dore to testify on this because we know that he got paid by Putin's puppet, Bashar the Butcher in Syria. He got paid a couple $1,000 with the Serena Shrim Award, for example, which is basically a way for Russia through their proxies to funnel money to one of their good boys in the West. I'd be interested in investigating if he's got like financial inducements or whatever from the Kremlin as well. It could just be that apart from that, he's just organic and a dummy, but it could also be that he's getting paid to undermine a lot of our youth. And we're not really interested in that. We're in an information war, and in a Cold War, if you lose the information war, you have no will to bring up a deterrence in the actual physical war, and then you've lost. So, and that's what happened in Vietnam. So.
I want to throw it over to Jangles, who's been waiting a very long period of time.
Like a good boy. I want everyone to know I genuinely do sympathize with the notion that like it is a little scary when any sort of state or big platforms like YouTube or Twitch get to decide what is and is not misinformation and what is and is not propaganda. But just because that is a little bit scary and that the bar should be pretty high, because I value free speech. I'm an American, so I like my propaganda homegrown. But I do think that there should be a line, and I think RT absolutely crosses it. What Tautach was saying, like, yes, there is a very real chance, and it has been demonstrated that like pushing, like banning things like that do push certain people into more radicalized echo chambers. And that's something that we should be aware of, and that is a negative consequence that should be at least acknowledged and to the best extent we can addressed. However, it doesn't just, we're not just talking about the radicals. The harm caused is not just from radicals. It could just be from the average individual person. And so the harm, someone can be radically wrong without being radicalized. I think a big example of why RT absolutely reaches that threshold of propaganda is like what I said earlier, how they treated COVID information at home and abroad. At abroad, they wanted to sow doubt. And I don't think it's controversial to say that vaccine hesitancy and vaccine skepticism is radically wrong, but it's not a radical belief in terms of it being on the fringes of American society, and RT played a part in that. And that's who we're targeting. We're not targeting the radicals. That's, you almost have to think of them as a lost cause. However, deplatforming absolutely does have a positive impact on reducing the amount of normies that are talking about something. There's a study in the 2021 study published in the American. Oh fuck, their journal name is fucked up. I put it in chat. It's called "Evaluating the Effectiveness of Deplatforming as a Moderation Strategy on Twitter." So they looked at Alex Jones, Mao Yiannopoulos, and Owen Benjamin. So those were 3 people that were banned. And following bans, they were significantly less talked about, and they showed that the overall activity and toxicity levels of their supporters declined after their deplatforming. It does work.
I'm glad you brought this up, because I think it's like sort of the perfect case study. Like these studies that show the effectiveness of deplatforming, they're focusing on like the toxicity of the platform themselves. And so there's also been studies regarding like Reddit and its banning of like fat people hate and like other subreddits which were considered to be too toxic for the platform. But and we do see like positive effects on Reddit itself. The problem is that those like effects are then externalized elsewhere, right? And so I think you said something earlier, like the problem, or sort of like at the heart of this contention, is whether or not harm is really caused by like radicals, or whether it's caused by like someone who's just sort of like casually browsing one of these subreddits, or like casually sees a Russia Today video and is like propagandized to it. And maybe this is like the heart of the disagreement, but I disagree on this. I think that the problem really is with the radicals and, the fracturing of society, pushing people into these camps where they're not seeing a lot of dissent. I think that you really need to be meeting people where they're at, and exposing them to ideas that are challenging their beliefs. I think it's sort of
it's not an either or
to me.
situation, though, right?
Some shit just hits different, dude.
Like, we don't have to
different.
just focus on radicals, and we don't have to just focus on like the normies and stuff. Like, it could be like the difference between like getting stabbed once with a big knife and getting stabbed 1,000 times by a tiny little needles.
Okay,
like, they can both cause
Jangles, You said that my question to you is, Jangles, you said that the difference that makes Russia Today censorable is their COVID coverage. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so specifically, it's not just misinformation; it's willful, purposeful misinformation to like in an
What did they do?
information war. So at home, they took COVID seriously. The reporting that RT did at home, COVID is serious. Get vaccinated. They went so far to say like, if you don't get vaccinated, you're a moron. Almost like not verbatim, but that was the tone of the coverage at home. COVID serious. Get vaccinated. Wear masks. COVID serious. Abroad, though, the message was very different, and it was very different in a way that was different per country. It was targeted at their specific outlets to sow doubts. That's what their propaganda outlets do. They're not there. They want to spread that misinformation just to make it a little bit more, make it doubt. I don't trust the vaccine. I think, there might not be microchips in it, but I don't like how they're pushing it. I'm really skeptical. That's who RT kind of appeals to. It could be a far left person or or a really conservative person, but someone who doesn't trust the mainstream opinion. And so that's why I think it meets that level.
Jacobs, I just got a quick question there because you said at home. I'm just wondering, like, you're talking about in Russia, right? Because RT for the longest time never broadcasted in Russian. It was all for export, right?
Yeah, let's see.
Like they do have some stuff in Russian now, but like the thing with RT's part of a big conglomerate thing where they have their separate state networks like Russia One.
Yeah, I can send you the article that I was referencing on that.
Okay, thanks.
I'm gonna throw it over to Jake, and then we're probably going to. I thought I had your name written down. Okay. Oh, okay. Taft really wants to go.
Okay, yeah, really quickly. I think that I'm really happy that this is our first discussion because I think it's a great litmus test for our future discussion on critical race theory. And like, I'm not someone who wants to ban critical race theory or the discussion or talking about it, even though I think it can be like a quite toxic idea. But yeah, we'll talk about that later since it was a quick thing for me.
It's just but CRT is not funded by the Kremlin, though. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of CRT. I've debated against it in many.
Yeah, we'll get into the nuance later.
It's not the Kremlin. Right?
Well, it's just that like it's like porn, right? There's a difference between some guy saying like just I believe in some right wing opinion, and then there's a difference between like. When you know it when you see it, you know what I'm saying? Like, oh, this is fucking propaganda, and just over time you can see the body of work of RT definitely fits the bill. It's not really debatable. It's not just like a little bit right wing. It's not. It's like a calculated endeavor to misinform people for a specific political advocacy. It'd be just as bad if the really hardcore anti-CRT people were right about like parents really pushing kids to be trans and stuff. That's like we're dealing with what you fear about the left actually happening on the right, just for different topics, right? They actually do convince people to think weird stuff, radical shit, all the time.
We need to wrap this up, so I'm gonna allow everybody to do ending statements. Thank you for informing us on how Russia Today is like pornography.
You know it when you see it. Come on, man.
Wonderful.
Have you not heard that before? Read a book.
That's like an ultra famous quote.
Yeah.
No, look.
From the Hustler
I've never. When I watch RT, I've never engaged in that activity. I'm just saying.
Yeah, Dylan's a good boy. He's never even seen porn. Okay, can we keep it PG on this panel? Thank you.
Exactly. I've never.
You're all degenerates.
Yes.
Would never talk about porn on this panel.
So we're gonna do wrap ups. We're gonna have people just give their ending statements uninterrupted.
So you go.
So be sure to mute your mic if you cannot do that. So we're going to start with Taft.
Oh boy. Yeah, I'll just reiterate. I think that most of the people here, everyone here, they're not fans of Russian propaganda. We don't want people believing wrong things. I think maybe the disagreement is mostly centered in how you manage conversations to get the best kinds of results and how you prevent people, inoculate people from taking in propaganda. And I think that the best way to do that is not by just banning things outright, but by meeting them with good information and more better information. And I think that the Biden administration is like a really good example of that as far as how they've been able to counter Russian propaganda in their press briefings. So yeah, that's all.
Okay. Next, I'm going to throw it over to Kevin Castley.
Thanks, Don. Yeah. So I think I've made myself pretty clear tonight that when we're dealing with such a pernicious entity as RT, which exists solely for foreign export and has been proven to basically have this two sides approach of co-opting and galvanizing the far left and the far right to demoralize and degrade our social fabric and cohesion in the West, to undermine liberal democracy, trust in our institutions, etc., and promote all sorts of insane conspiracy theories to basically indoctrinate everybody progressive and left of that, and then these GooberCon conservatoid Tucker Carlson fans and stuff, and turn them against their own countries and talk about how Putin's a real man and how China's traditional and all this sort of stuff. I think it's very clear that we've had a long track record from them since their inception of them trying to undermine us. We're in a Cold War, an information war, and if we lose the information war, we're not going to have the will to ever seriously wage the actual Cold War, and then they will win. I mean, we're seeing Putin take advantage of this right now by going into Ukraine, and the only thing that he got wrong was that Ukraine would fight back. He was right that the West wouldn't do anything apart from that. He just thought that Ukraine would surrender quickly. Fortunately, he was wrong about that, but they have the will to fight, and they got serious about cracking down on Kremlin propaganda. And I will say, I did start a watchdog on RT with my co-host Spooky Nukies, and every Saturday night we react to RT and other propaganda, and we do everything that we can to debunk this absolute insidious propaganda. And just because we do that doesn't mean we can't also ban them if you're somebody who's more powerful in the position of the CEO
I'm losing
Twitch
it.
or YouTube, and it should have been done a very long time ago.
Dude.
Thank you.
I can't fucking deal with it.
Yeah, so Russia Today spreads misinfo, spreads disinfo, agents of chaos. I think that we really do not have, like I said, especially with the comparison to Fox News. We really do not allocate nearly as much time, energy, resources into pointing out Russia Today for what it is. I think especially in progressive and leftist spaces. You can go on twitter.com right now and you can see a bunch of people talking about how the people who work for Russia Today they're actually the real leftists. Personally, I think that's fucking terrifying. So yeah, there is the potential that when you take away the platform that extremists are congregating around, they do tend to funnel into weirder places. But again, this is a matter of utilitarian calculus. I would rather we prevent the radicalization of a shit ton of people, and unfortunately, some people are going to get pushed into worse places. But as Jangles pointed out, there are actually things that we can do about that as well. Russia Today, all they do is, it's just propaganda. It really is just propaganda. Now, should we, like some people said, maybe address propaganda of other kinds? Maybe United States propaganda from other countries? Yeah, sure. But, that is sort of a whataboutism that was brought up, and yeah, it doesn't change the fact that Russia Today really pushes, I think, really toxic narratives. Yeah, I'm really not upset that they're off YouTube and Twitch.
Okay, next I'm going to throw it over to last username.
Yeah, so I think all this, we're talking RT is this sort of uniquely capable of dangerously brainwashing people and driving them crazy. But I mean, 95% of what's on YouTube is dangerous bullshit. And the problem with banning it is, I'm trying to think of what kind of policy YouTube could adopt that would be sort of consistent and principled and allow them to ban RT without causing all kinds of other consequences. Maybe if they had a policy of we will ban all state media from literally every state, fuck the CBC, fuck PBS, fuck it all, I might be into that. That's kind of appealing to me, but just picking particular states because they've got bad relations with them right now, or because they're doing something admittedly terrible, but just to ban them because of that, it doesn't seem like a good idea.
It was good, actually.
And Kevin doesn't like that.
Jonathan
that
Isaac thing
the
going
dangerous
on.
bullshit coming from RT is inorganic as opposed to something like Hassan Piker. But I don't see. I mean, there's lots of channels on YouTube that get the money from somewhere. If it's not a state, they might get it from their own organization, from businesses, from who knows where. Like worrying about that just seems like, again, opening a can of worms and going down to like investigating people's finances to figure out whether they're allowed to speak or not. It just seems like a really scary policy for them to adopt. So, I'd say I'd rather get my Russian propaganda from a channel that's literally labeled like Russian propaganda. This is Russian propaganda, rather than have it sort of more surreptitiously come through all these supposedly organic channels, which we can't actually verify organic, don't really know anything about them. Like that seems, it seems simpler and probably safer to do it that way.
He's like a libertarian.
Okay, going to throw it over to Kenny.
Yeah, so I mean, I've been hearing about what you guys have been saying, and I think the main arguments for banning Russia today, I heard one from Jangles saying they had COVID miscalculations, and then another one, somebody else said they basically are right-wing radicalization. And to me, I think that those are not bright enough lines. Those don't fall into the category of, okay, we need to actually ban them from YouTube and everything like that. The only channels that I would really consider banning are channels that, like, I guess, advocate violence against people and violence against America, and those kinds of things. If you can prove that, then I would consider banning it. But just having some COVID misinformation and something like that, and being a right-wing news or opinion source does not cut it for me.
Throwing it over to Jangles.
Okay, to be clear, it wasn't just COVID misinformation. It was the willful misinformation that differed from what the authors. It might not have been Russia Today. So, Kevin, it might not have been like Russia Today in Russia, but it was like the columnists, people who write for Russia Today, who were like all on board the like, no, take COVID seriously train. So that I might have made a mistake there. But the point still stands. It was all right, here's what we're putting out to the rest of the world, and here's what we're telling people at home. That's what I was talking about. Not just the COVID misinformation, but the willful, like I'm saying one thing to the people I care about, and then I'm telling other people something different. Taftaj said the word inoculation in her closing statement, and that reminded me of a whole body of research that would have been really useful for me to remember during the actual discussion, but I guess that's just how it goes. So yeah, we can talk about utilitarian calculus. We can talk about the nuances of like, well, if you ban some state media, do you have to ban others? But at the end of the day, I'm a patriot. I don't want foreigners taking jobs from hardworking American propagandists.
Dude, my heart has been pumping so hard.
Throwing it now over to
like caffeine.
Duma.
Yeah, this was a really fun conversation. I guess like my conflictions. I guess there was like a lot of conflictions, right? Where it's like, I never really know what Kenny's audio quality is going to be until he actually starts speaking. So I'm like always have to toggle on the volume rocker
Kenny
for him.
has been good today.
Yeah, and then on top of microphones, I mean, I love how actual Jake does slights and comments every once in a while and just forgets that he's unmuted or muted. It gives some spice to the conversation today. Eric came in really good perspectives and Tafta as well. I always love Kevin. Kevin, don't stop, okay? But I do want to take an acknowledgement for last username. While I do agree that Sesame Street has been in the game a little too long, about over 50 years, I'm not quite on the bar yet to say that they're state-run propaganda. I mean, I don't know who is behind that Big Bird costume, but maybe one day he'll do the face reveal. I understand that Cookie Monster is basically a drug addict, and no one wants to really like talk about that. And the Grouch is essentially a homeless man that everybody just acknowledges it's homeless, and we just want to perpetuate this propaganda that a trash can could be a home. But, like, I'm just still not there yet in terms of state-run propaganda for PBS. But, this was fun. I'm glad to be back.
Okay. Now I'm going to send it over to Jake.
Yeah, I don't know. I think, did you imply that Hassan's a CIA plant earlier? I think that's funny. Or whatever, funded.
I mean, he has the legs to be a plant.
He
does.
Does he? I'm interested in, I guess, Kenny thinking that violence is bad, but disinfo that causes harm isn't bad, and why just slapping somebody is worse than teaching somebody else to slap them for you. I don't know what the difference is necessarily, like materially, but I guess it's maybe you could save face if it's not you doing it. I guess. Anyway, yeah, I don't have anything else to say except for if you want to hear more about this, every weekday, 7 p.m. Eastern, me and Fatty Boom Baladi, happy to have you. at our show every week. Come and see it.
Okay, I want to say if somebody said anything in the ending statement that you want to respond to the last topic, the last opportunity you'll have to do that is in the intro to the next topic. And the next topic is the Don't Say Gay bill, which is a controversial piece of legislation that seems on track to pass in Florida and is being proposed in many other states as well. I know that everybody has done their research, and I don't need to explain to them at all any of the components of the bill. And in fact, I'm going to probably throw it over to Taft to open us up on this topic, and I'm sure that they'll be able to explain to everybody the components of the bill. It's going to be Taft, Kevin, Merrick. It's going to go in order from right to left. I got to use the bathroom. Everybody knows the rules, right? So if I step away for a moment, nobody will start dropping slurs, right?
Oh.
Wonderful. Okay. I was looking at you, Jake.
Yeah.
I'm going to throw it over to Taft.
Slurs.
Okay. Perfect timing, because I just got into a safe place in Elden Ring, so I can talk about this bill. Basically, the bill talks about, I think there's like multiple components. The first component is transparency. So it makes it law that schools need to make sure that parents are aware of what kind of curriculum they're going to be teaching. The second is a ban on sexual orientation teaching for children kindergarten to grade 3, I believe, as well as a ban on material considered inappropriate beyond that. And in addition to that, it introduces a procedure by which schools can basically bring up legal cases against, or I'm sorry, parents can bring up legal cases against schools. And of that, the most controversial part of the bill, for me at least, is the legal procedures which allow parents to basically drag schools in on the Florida dime to basically sue them. I think that there's legitimate arguments about the kind of chilling effect that this could have. We have to see how that gets played out in court as far as what is established for precedent and what is considered inappropriate behavior. In regards to the not being allowed to teach sexual material from kindergarten to grade 3, I think that's pretty legitimate. And in regards to the information that the school is now required to give parents, I think that's also pretty legitimate. There is a provision in the bill that allows schools to withhold information if there's a reasonable risk of abuse or neglect. So there's like some arguments about you should be able to withhold information from parents if they're going to be like abusive to their gay child. The bill does make an exception for that, so schools can still withhold that information if they think a parent's going to, abuse their child for being gay. So overall, I think it's been sort of overhyped as far as how dangerous it is. But there are some legitimate parts of it that are a little bit iffy for sure, and I hope to get into discussion about them.
Okay. So because this is our opening statements for the second topic, I am able to address what was mentioned in ending statements from the last topic. Kenny brought up something about how that violence would cross the line, but disinformation necessarily wouldn't. RT is a network that specifically has actually encouraged or condoned violence. They've even parroted gloriously, like bigged up, glamorized Vladimir Putin's nuclear threats against the United States, for example. And they've also defended Putin's invasion of Ukraine and Georgia and the invasion of Ukraine in 2014, which is definitely violence. And so as a network, they've also in the past, and their affiliates have done apologetics for the Charlottesville riot, which resulted in the death of Heather Heyer, who went there to protest against fascism, and she was murdered. So I just want to set the record straight on that. So now getting into my opening about this particular topic, it is kind of interesting how these both do kind of tie in together, though, because for the same reason that I'm against RT, I also am against this bill, because if you support gay rights, you should be against Ron DeSantis, you should be against this bill in Florida, and you should also recognize fascist Russia as being led by an ultra-conservative, revanchist, homophobic regime that tortures, imprisons, and executes people on the basis of their sexual orientation. And we see people in Florida, some of whom have been indoctrinated by RT and whatnot, others by other networks, but they're coming out here to basically try to dehumanize and to basically deny the existence of anybody who's not basically heterosexual. And it's incredibly insidious. It basically would turn, if you were to follow this to its logical conclusion, do this across the
Sure.
US, it would turn the US into a country that's not worth living in. So thank you.
Fiery statement.
He didn't do
Next,
it.
we're throwing it over to Merrick.
Right. So this bill, I think, is probably one of the more disgusting, more insidious things that we've seen in terms of legislation recently.
Your boy always talks last.
I think on the surface, it purports to want to keep parents informed about what's going on with their children. But when you actually start to look into the bill and get into it, you'll see that that it actually really incentivizes teachers and administrators to divulge any and all information to parents regarding things that children disclose to them. And there is a provision in the bill that says, any prudent person who would think that abuse could happen because of disclosure of this information obviously doesn't have to. The problem with this is that a teacher is still pressured if they want to keep their job to disclose information. The second problem with this is that prudent person is actually at the discretion of whichever judge happens to take this case if it does make it all the way to court. The next problem with this is that under this bill there is a health and wellness survey or sheet, the questionnaire that teachers have to give to children. And parents actually have to be informed of the questionnaire. They have to see it first. They are able to read everything that's on it, and they have to sign off on it to be given to their children. So if children do disclose something on the questionnaire that they don't want their parents to see, or that they don't feel comfortable having their parents know about, well, the parent is then going to be wondering, hey, why am I now not seeing the results of this questionnaire? What does this mean? And they know the content of it, so they know that it has something to do with gender identity.
I like them sometimes. Interact with other
mental
folks that
health,
isn't me. I get
or
tired of
sexual
myself.
orientation. So that sort of defeats the whole purpose of being able to not disclose this sort of thing to any parent who is potentially abusive. We also know that it can be very, very difficult to determine this sort of thing. So the bill is written, I think, contradictory, and at times it's very vague. They talk about how we can't talk about things from K through third, and they say, well, teachers can't really engage in this sort of thing. They can't push it.
Succeed,
but
so
it is very, very vague when you actually read through it. And it does give parents the right to sue. So I think it's setting a really, really bad precedent. It's actually modeled off the Texas legislation, which is a nightmare worst case scenario bill. And I think that, everything about it is much more insidious than it appears on the surface. And this will do nothing but harm trans and queer children, who we have countless research, we have countless studies and amounts of evidence that we can see are benefited in every portion of their life for their entire lifespan by affirmative care, which is essentially and incredibly important early on, because we know that early childhood development is essential and very important for people's lives. So I think this is one of the most disgusting bills that we've seen in a while.
Okay, I'm going to throw it over to last username.
It's really hard to get a proper idea of what this bill actually says, because you get a different answer if you ask everyone. The bill's only 4 pages. I'm reading it right now, but I'm not through it yet. So I will just say what the principles that I support. I like the idea that children should have privacy. Even very young children should have the right to privacy, even from their parents, which is to say that teachers shouldn't go out of their way to tell to force children to reveal something to the parents, or to reveal something that children don't want to reveal to the parents. I generally like that idea. I just don't, but I worry that trying to protect that privacy could just provide a way for teachers to hide damaging things that they're doing to kids, indoctrination, teaching them weird ideologies, and I have no I'm not at all confident that the teachers are not doing that. And so I could easily see how that right to privacy could serve to protect teachers doing things to kids that none of us would be comfortable with, or well, I wouldn't be comfortable with anyway. So that's what I'm. Whether I support this bill or not, it's going to come down to which side of that issue it falls on.
Okay, next we're going to throw it over to Kenny.
I'm going to be debating from basically only two positions here. I'm only going to make two claims. One, parents have more rights over their children than teachers. Okay, I'm not saying parents have unlimited rights. I'm saying parents have more rights over their children than teachers. Okay, number one. Number two, sexuality should not be taught between kindergarten and third grade. Okay, those are my two positions. And basically, the Don't Say Gay bill reflects the Parental Rights and Education bill reflects those two positions. And insofar as they reflect those two positions, then I'm fine with it. And basically, look, it is my belief that you should not teach.
Holy shit.
I think a lot of people's
so
beliefs.
slow.
You should not teach anything about a person's sex or sexuality between the ages of 5 and 8 years old.
Oh,
These
you don't
people
hear this,
don't
Captain
even
Chronic.
know. They haven't even hit puberty yet. You know, they're still exploring themselves. They're still children. You know, you cannot confuse them in that case. And even if you what this parental rights and education bill is doing is it's basically saying, yeah, you know, can't teach, you know, between those age ranges, and furthermore, we need parental consent. So that reflects my first position, basically. If you are going to teach about sexuality, you should have parental consent. So, you know, what we know is that you should not give teachers should not give unsolicited sexual advice to their students. They should not talk about sexuality to their students. And if they get to the age where they should get parental consent. So I'm totally on board this.
Okay, next I'm going to throw it over to Jangles.
So we're going to talk about the text of the bill in the open discussion a lot, but in my opening statement, I'll really want to emphasize how concerning it is that this bill is being openly lied about by the people who are proponents of it, openly and brazenly lying about it. Like the reason this bill is being introduced is because some people think that any discussion of LGBT issues is inherently grooming children. His press secretary said that. Like, this is the anti-grooming bill. That's a lie. It's not about sex education. In fact, there was a proposed amendment to make the bill about sex education, talking about sexual activity, and Republicans shot it down. No, they want to ban sexual orientation and gender identity discussions. I need to ask, I am a gay man who is going to adopt children, all right? If I bring my kindergartner to school on his or her or their first day of class, and some students have a question like, wait, why does this kid have two dads? Am I introducing sexuality into the classroom? Have I, as a lot of conservatives that I've talked to, am I at risk of grooming my kid because he is aware that two men can have a child and two women can have a child? Is that indoctrination? Is that grooming? Because that's what the proponents of this bill are actually pushing for. That's why they want to frame it as the anti-grooming bill. Right? It's this horrible, not even resurgence. It never went away. This horrible connotation that any queer person is inherently dangerous around children. That's what this bill is for. That's what it's trying to propose. That's what it's trying to really, really lift up. And so you can say it loud and proud like you used to be able to a few years ago. This bill is disgusting. And its proponents are they are very comfortable lying. And that's my opening statement.
Okay, fiery opening statement. We're going to throw it over to Joe. Oh, Duma. The Russian State Duma. Sorry.
It's all good. It's all good. While I understand that everybody has different things that go on in their day to day, I do find it very peculiar. And it kind of reflects the data about the bill itself that nobody really knows what's in the bill. and then they posit positions about the bill on a level of feels when it's clear that they don't have it. I have it right here. So the thing that's within controversy and the thing that continually gets misrepresented is line 3 of the bill itself. I'm just going to read it verbatim. Classroom, and this is a prohibition, by the way. Classroom instruction by school personnel or third parties on sexual orientation or gender identity may not occur in kindergarten through grade 3 or in a matter that is not age appropriate or developmentally appropriate for students in accordance with state standards. That extends this because they do not clearly define the two things that they describe here, which is age appropriate and developmentally appropriate. This bill is just dead on its face. If enacted, you're going to have situations where discretion is going to be on the individual presenting the argument. What exactly does developmentally appropriate even mean? I understand about DAP, developmentally appropriate practices. That's a practice that's done in pre-K to K. So what does that look like for someone at the 6th grade level? Like, what does DAP look like at high school? What does DAP look like in middle school? Something that isn't applied in those fields. And I asked around, I called 7 districts today to say, hey, do you have DAP or some level of these practices, developmentally appropriate practices at these levels? I talked to 6th grade guidance counselors, 7th grade, 8th grade, high school guidance counselors, and they couldn't tell me anything of sufficiency about what that language would mean. They all said the exact same thing. You would need to hear within the bill a description of what it means about developmentally appropriate before we can have an opinion. We need to hear what it means by age appropriate to have an opinion. Mind you, sexuality is already being taught in schools. Sexuality does not appear in this bill because sexuality can be taught at an age appropriate level from K all the way to 12, and data supports that from Rutgers University. So I don't know what to tell you when you opposit conservative talking points, when you opposit bills that were clearly copied by Texas Republicans. This bill is bad. And I would love for Republicans to bring forth legislation that actually posits these arguments in ways to the things that they actually want, but they don't do that because they know they can't go that far due to protections like FERPA, due to protections like HIPAA. They understand this. And also, I think it should be incredibly abhorrent to every conservative to have a state legislating at the school level. We've known this time and time again, that we leave this up to districts to make decisions about curriculum that's being taught. And as they learned from CRT, if you can't find the boogeyman at the school district level within school board meetings and through FOIA requests, you just wait till your Republican state legislatures to do it for you. And that's what they're doing here. It's the exact same thing they're doing with the CRT bills as they're doing here. And if you're a Republican, this overreach should really concern you because it's essentially censorship of individuals in schools, and you're just allowing that to happen.
Okay, I'm gonna now throw it over to Jake.
Yeah, there's been talks of like teachers throwing around weird ideologies, whatever that means. It could go one way or the other, sure. Talks of parental consent happen in this. Kids can't learn about stuff unless the parents agree that they should learn about it. But man, kids deserve privacy. I don't know how you can have kids deserve privacy and also like, oh, watch out for the weird ideologies. Like sometimes there's not many safe places for kids, especially queer kids, to talk about their experiences. It's not necessarily true that a kid should be talked to by a teacher or something, but a lot of teachers sometimes are the kid's only source of outside of parents, like sort of adult confidence that they can talk to, and that happens from time to time, and that's an organic thing. This bill teaches kids basically, like if you can't talk about sexuality, the kids can't talk about sexuality because the teachers can't talk about it. Like, and if the teachers can't talk about it, like, what do you do? Like, to Jangle's point, what do you do when the teacher's gay? What do you do when the teacher's trans? How do you answer those questions to those kids? Honestly, like, it's not like being gay indoctrinates people. Again, it's this heteronormative, like really cis-normative way to go about it, implying in some way that because a person has this fundamental feeling within them that they are somehow deviant and a danger to people. It teaches kids to narc on their fucking their peers. Only rats support this kind of bill, dude. That's it. Just rats vibes. That's what it is. You're a rat.
Okay. Very fiery opening. We're gonna go into open discussion. Is there anybody that wants to open it up? Kevin was the first to raise
Snitch
his hand,
ass
so I'm gonna
Bill.
talk to
You're
Kevin
damn
already.
right.
Everyone wants to talk. I'll throw it to Kevin first.
Okay, wonderful.
Alright,
Thanks, Dylan. So I just got a couple points to open with. I don't normally do this, but I saw an excellent comment in the chat. There was a guy in the chat, Bronstead, who said, so are we going to finally ban all celebrations of Valentine's Day at school and lock up any adult? Well, it wouldn't be locking up, it'd be suing, that which they'd be liable to under this bill. Any adult forcing children to participate or discussing it for being a pedophile, which I think is a great point, because understand something, in all of this, there's this implicit assumption that straight coded relationships are just normal. They're not even sexual if they're like 6 years old or 5 years old or whatever. But gay, ooh, that's sexualized, that's taboo. We can't have that. That's spooky, basically. Insane. And the second point that I wanted to bring up to open with this, just so that we understand the context here, I brought these up before, but they change from time to time. The most recent stuff here, this is from the Trevor Project on suicide statistics concerning LGBT youth, is that LGBT youth in the United States are 4 times more likely to attempt suicide than their heterosexual peers. So what we're basically saying is that we're okay if you support this bill. You're okay with fostering and legitimizing and consolidating and entrenching a culture that basically sets in place and upholds norms that encourage suicide rates. And we're talking about what was it? The estimate is between the ages of 13 to 24, 1.8 million LGBTQ youth seriously consider suicide in the US. So a lot of those actually happen, and a lot of young folks don't live to their 25th birthday as a result of this culture of stigmatization. So what we have from legislators here that are supporting this and the people that are defending it is what they like to do is to essentially maintain a culture where we've inculcated everybody to bully anybody who goes against heterosexual norms, and to take those heterosexual norms to a point where it's not even thought of as sexual. And it shouldn't necessarily be thought of as sexual if, like, oh, kids do like a Valentine's Day thing or whatever. But it's immediately seen as sexual if it anyway has anything to do with LGBTQ folks, or as Jangles mentioned, what about parents? Because if the teacher even addresses the question, they just have to say, I have a right to maintain my silence, because otherwise they can literally be sued by some GooberCon parent who's got a bunch of astroturfed courts, basically, or I should say law firms that can't wait to make a big stink out of this so that they can up their own prestige in GooberCon law circles and try to get on the Supreme Court one day. So get famous for that by ruining somebody's life, young teachers. So.
Okay, I'm gonna throw it over next. I'm gonna go down the list. Merrick, Taft, did you raise your hand? I didn't see.
I didn't.
Okay, Merrick, last name Jangles Shake. That's the order we have currently.
Yeah, so I think this idea of sexuality being taught is like really clearly not what's happening at all. And again, Jangles brings up a good point when he says, when I show up to school with my husband and my child, am I teaching sexuality? No, of course not. You say, we don't need to be teaching sexuality, but heterosexuality is already taught constantly, all the time. Just by existing in our current society as it is, heterosexuality is already taught to small children. So when you go and you say, hey, this isn't the only avenue, there are people who love other people, you don't even need to teach it in terms of sex or sexually attracted. You can literally teach it to younger children in terms of love. So you can absolutely teach this and it not be a huge issue. And we find that when we have affirmation of these things, like was just stated, let's see, you said you referenced the Trevor Project, and you're absolutely correct. So the Trevor Project did a study in 2020, and the Trevor Project is, of course, one of the largest, I guess, programs or organizations in the country that works with LGBT people, and they try to prevent them from committing suicide. So that is what the Trevor Project is. And they found that affirming care in schools specifically for LGBT students lowered their odds of trying to kill themselves by 40%. So when you take that away, you're saying, whether you realize it or not, you're saying that you are okay with LGBTQ students attempting to commit suicide 40% more than they do if we were to actually say, hey, it is okay to talk about these things.
Yeah, I'd like a more conversational
Affirming
style
care
as
means
well.
like positivity surrounding these subjects, saying that these things are okay, that it's not wrong to be trans, that it's not wrong to be gay, that these things exist and that they are acceptable. We can also see that among trans youth, that being able to use your chosen name in school,
she's
I'm sorry,
trans, by
each
the way,
additional
so might have a
context
hot
of
Blair
being
White take here, 'cause
able
I just
to
watched,
use your
she kinda ducked
chosen
behind
name.
chat
So
and me.
with your
She's
friends,
made a face
at
at that,
home,
so.
at school, at work, decreases suicidal
Don't do
ideation
it.
by another 20% and suicidal behavior by 60%. So
Okay, this bill doesn't ban you from using a different name in school.
This ban absolutely
they already have legislation around gender affirmation in names. You can't have, like, in the state in Florida, if I remember correctly, teachers don't have to use names that are against the individual's academic record.
Okay, but we're talking about this bill, and this bill doesn't ban.
But these are
they're stacking though.
These are compounding.
Yeah.
These are compounding.
These are compounding variables.
Practices, policies, and procedures.
Right.
But it's just not a relevant fact.
It's totally irrelevant.
It's absolutely irrelevant.
It's
what?
Wait. Okay, you all said it at the same
time. The bill
time.
also allows students to talk about these things. The only thing
that's not true.
No, it's
not.
Stop.
Read the bill. It says classroom instruction.
Wait.
By school personnel.
Deep wave. Thank you, dude. Appreciate it.
Let me be.
First time?
Next person.
First time gifting subbies, dude. Appreciate it.
So let me just be clear.
5 of them.
So most of you have a different perspective. I'm not gonna allow a pile on to happen. I'll just view people because there's very few people in this room who disagree with the bill. So I want to make sure that you don't just all pile on them. I want to make sure that they get to respond to what they were said. So Merrick was saying something. Taft was responding. Merrick again cheating through moral support through her boyfriend. So we're going to have Merrick finish your statement, then have Taft respond, then we're going to return to the list, okay?
Right. So my point in bringing these things up, Taft, are that these are examples of where we have affirmation for queer people and how we can see that when we have examples, clear-cut examples of affirmation, that it dramatically increases the well-being of these kids, right? So with the bill, because it is so vague, and because parents can bring law students, or I'm sorry, law students.
Am I the only fun one
parents
on here
can
tonight?
Bring lawsuits
Marriage
against teachers that talk about these sorts of things.
Very serious tonight.
Teachers are not going to ever bring this up, which means that the affirmation is not going to become a thing in these classrooms, because kids of their own accord are not going to be starting these conversations when they're this young. You also have to consider the fact that not only are, like as Joe Lewis pointed out, not only are we talking about K through 3rd, but it says it extends to grades beyond that with the addendum, the added thing of age relevant or developmental age appropriate for whatever stage they're talking about, right? So it's very, very, very easy for a teacher to hear students talking about this and use the given name. If kids start arguing about it, if the teacher says no, we are going to use their given name, a parent can sue for that, and teachers know this. So they're going to shut things like that down because they don't want to get fired. So this actually is relevant in this because all of these things are connected.
Without talking to each other,
Do I respond now?
Yeah, you can respond now.
Okay, yeah. It goes to third grade, right? These are eighth graders that we're talking about as far as where we're banning the discussion of sexual orientation or gender identity. There isn't an epidemic of 8-year-olds who are killing themselves because they can't use their preferred name. 8-year-olds are concerned about the cereal they're eating in the morning. We're not like, we don't need to stress so much about like their affirmation of their gender identity. Once we get into older ages, right, beyond 8 years old, it doesn't ban discussion at all of like this of just talking about gender identity or sexual orientation. It bans it in an inappropriate way. And what we've seen some of these schools is like teachers handing out, surveys where it asks students to list their sexual kinks. That's the kind of thing that we're wanting to ban here, and we're wanting to create transparency for, right? I agree with you. I think, like I said in my very opening statement, I think the worst part of this bill is the legal procedures for how parents can like raise issues with the school. And I think that's like a pretty legitimate concern with the bill. But I think that you're massively overstating it when you're talking about like suicide because no one can say gay below the age of 8 years old, which isn't even true. The children can talk about this. They can use whatever preferred name they can. It just doesn't allow classroom instruction by the professor or by the teacher. So, yeah.
So Taft,
I'm sorry. Wait, hold on. Wait. Because I actually have the lawsuit that started this bill. So can I mention that real quickly? Because it is very relevant to basically the intent behind the bill. So the lawsuit that actually started this bill was because of a 13-year-old who started being able to go by the pronouns and the name that they wanted at their school. And I'm not sorry, I don't remember which city in Florida it was. But yeah, so the parents started to sue the school district. It was in Tallahassee, Florida. They're suing the Leon County School Board for violating their parental rights by secretly affirming their daughter, who was 13 years old at the time, in her gender confusion. The parents believed that this girl had rapid onset gender dysphoria, which is not something that actually exists. There's only one study that has ever showed rapid onset gender dysphoria, and it's not actually a study, it's a survey exclusively of parents where no actual transgender people or children were consulted. It was just parents being asked, hey, do you think your kid is acting trans now? So this was what was put forth as evidence in the original lawsuit. And the things that sparked this lawsuit, which sparked this bill, were using the correct pronouns, and let's see, how she wanted to be identified.
Okay, but the bill doesn't ban pronoun changes. It doesn't ban that.
But the way that we know that this will be implemented.
No, we don't know it's going to be implemented that way.
Right, but we've seen this play out 1,000 times. We understand that judges in Florida are conservative. We can see how Ron DeSantis is talking about it. We can look at the legislation in Florida and we can see their political bias. I mean, these things aren't existing in a vacuum, and we don't have to pretend like we don't understand how these things are actually utilized and put into practice by conservatives.
The problem is just better than this. This interpretation requires like massively overstepping on what the bill actually says. Like what we are talking about isn't classroom instruction, right? So in order for a judge to rule that it's not appropriate would require like massive overstepping in how you interpret the bill, which, okay, if that happens, yeah, that's really bad, right? But I think that like your assumption that like the worst possible result is going to happen, it seems like fear mongering to me.
We know that judges in Florida are not LGBTQ friendly on average when we look at
therefore they're just going to
we don't know this like
bill.
You need to convince people that your predictions are true, right? You can't just say
this has been a fight since the 80s.
Wait, this has been fun. Don't get me wrong; it's been a lot of fun. I want to step in. I want to say something. Look, first of all, teaching about marriage is not teaching about sex. Okay, when you teach about a couple getting married, most kids don't even know, what they do during marriage and things like that. They just see a happy family. That's it. And if it's two guys, you know, a guy and a girl, that's marriage, you know, that's teaching about marriage. It's not teaching about sex.
What?
Sex is, and sexuality is specifically about what you do in the bedroom with the lights off.
Then why does the
And-
bill
or-
specify
or-
sexual
Hey, why-
orientation?
Sexuality
Kenny,
is
Kenny, can you
Wait,
clarify
pause,
something?
pause,
Hold on, hey, let me finish this up.
Go for it.
Okay, so when we're saying, or when these conservatives are saying, we're not going to have discussions about sexuality, doesn't mean you're not going to have discussions about marriage, okay? Which is something a child obviously sees. Number two, we're not getting to the heart of the argument here. We're not getting to the heart of the argument here. The heart of the argument is whether parents should have more rights over their teachers, a kid's teachers.
No.
That's the heart of the argument here. Because what the bill is fundamentally saying, what the bill is fundamentally saying is that teachers need to get parental consent. That's what it is. It's not like the teachers can never talk about this stuff. The teachers can talk about this stuff if the parents consent to it.
And if the parents don't,
that's
then they're
what it is.
liable to be
So what
sued
this
for
is
simply
an
teaching
examination of a
these
very sensitive.
It
Hold on,
can't.
one thing. This is an
You're
examination of a very
obfuscating this, dude.
sensitive subject in a person's life. Examination, very sensitive subject in a person's life. A person's sexuality, very sensitive. Everybody knows it is. Deeply private. A parent should have a right to have the first right of refusal over a
So-
teacher.
It's the
That's what it is.
Goobercons. It's the Goobercons. It's the conservatoids that are making out gay
You're trying to-
parents to be sexual. They have already
If
coded
you
it
want,
as
if you want to
deviant
play
and sexual.
casuistry with me, I can talk about groomer teachers all day. But I don't want
What
to.
do you-
Okay, but
Okay,
here's
Kenny,
the thing,
Kenny,
that's
Kenny.
just
I
a
won't
complete
talk about
deflection, though.
Kevin,
We're
can I-
talking about
Y'all
suicide.
wanted to
Wait,
say
wait, stop,
atmospheric
everybody,
triggering?
okay, everybody stop, okay? Let's stop for a second, okay? My rules still apply, and I want to go down to the list because there's a lot of people want to talk, but there've been people who've been waiting since the start of the topic. And so I'm going to go down the list, and trust me, first we're going to go to last username, Jangles, Jake. Merrick raised their hand. Is there anybody else who wanted to be added to that list? I'll write down Joe and Taft.
That's just everyone.
It is everyone, but everyone wants to talk, so everybody, you know. So
look, I'm not a lawyer, but I read this bill now, and from what I read, it looks like the person here who has the most accurate explanation of it is Taft. It does. I will hand it to Joe that the part about not teaching sexual orientation or gender identity in a way that's age inappropriate according to state standards seems a bit vague to me. But it's not obvious to me that that's going to be interpreted in some horrible way. And to Merrick, I mean, if you're going to tell me like it's, yeah, the bill doesn't say that all these terrible things can happen, but trust me, all these terrible things will happen. I mean, what am I supposed to do with that? Like, you've got to explain to me why. Give me some evidence that for some reason this bill means something completely different than what it says. I just can't accept like you saying, well, trust me, that's there's a whole secret agenda here, and the bill and the words don't mean what they mean. What they mean. Like,
Can I give you
on?
additional information
wait,
to hear your opinion, last username? Is that okay?
Orders.
Yeah.
Florida doesn't have any mandate towards sexual education. Does that change your opinion on this bill?
Why would that change it?
Sexual education
have
is
any
not
mandate.
mandated in the state of Florida. It's open season.
Okay.
So they have no education standards on sexual education. So when it comes to age appropriate and developmentally appropriate, they have no standards that they can refer to when they're looking for core standards.
Okay, well, I have no idea what that actually means then.
Oh boy.
So look
but
for
it's
those.
why is it going to be interpreted in the worst possible? Like,
Oh, boy.
if it says according to state standards, and there are no state standards.
I can explain it. I can explain it.
Stop. Joe?
The reason why that is of concern is because if you believe something is developmentally inappropriate, you should be able to look to the Department of Education and saying like, okay, what are the guidelines that the state is laying out in terms of sexual education? But there's nothing that lawyers can refer to on this. So they have the discretion to interpret it however they would like, because there aren't any standards of how this should be educated and how these things navigate.
Who has that discretion, though? I mean, if a parent comes along and files a complaint that says you taught something that was not that was age inappropriate according to state standards, but there are no state standards. It seems like that complaint could then be dismissed because it's not violating any state standards.
Holy fucking
but
shit!
this bill
dude.
specifically
talk for
imposes a new
45 minutes.
interpretation that the courts would be required to act on. In which case, a teacher can literally be sued for simply acknowledging the existence of LGBTQ folks. It's that simple, dude.
For example, like if I in the state of New Jersey, right? We have very strict what's up? We have very strict standards for sexual education. Like even when it comes to the current policies in place for what should be taught, you can only say that like by I think it's like by grade 5, you can just explain that like, hey, people can have children in a variety of ways. That's at grade 5. So you're not getting this education of like people fucking to make kids at grades K through 4. It's not happening in the state of New Jersey. So when you have standards about how these things are taught in an age appropriate manner, then that allows for lawyers and other individuals to navigate. However, I don't think you would even, you might not agree with this because if you have it to the discretion of a judge to determine what's age appropriate or not, their ideological leaning is definitely going to influence this if there's nothing to refer to. You know what I'm saying? They can only do the sort of past precedent, but even then it's kind of shaky.
I mean, I assume judges would tend to lean, if there's no law saying that you can't do something, then they tend to lean towards letting you do it, right?
Not in Florida, not conservatives. That's liberals, dude.
Well, again, you're just saying, well, trust me, the judges are not going to do what judges are supposed to do. Well, I mean, what am I supposed to do with that?
Have you seen Coney Barrett? Have you seen Kavanaugh? Have you seen any of the guys down in Florida, dude? Like,
okay, so
look, if you want to have a debate that judges are corrupt or something, then we can have that debate. But we're just talking about this bill.
It's just
I don't see a problem with the bill.
That's usually. I think you would support. I think you support what I want here, where it's like I'm totally fine.
Sure,
with
standards like standards are good. I like standards. It should all be explicit. You're right.
Yeah, if you're going to say something's developmentally inappropriate, what is that?
That should be defined. Yeah, for sure.
That should be defined.
Like I said, I think you're right that that's too big.
DeSantis signed this.
Yeah, this bill doesn't define it, dude. So you should be against this bill.
Okay, so we.
Well, I'm against that part.
I agree. It's like the strongest argument against the bill, for sure.
Okay. We need to keep going. There's so many people on the list, and we only have so much more time left on this topic before we have to get to the last topic of the night. So next is going to be Jingles. It's Jingles, Jake, Merrick, Joe, then in that order. And then we're probably going to start thinking about wrapping up the next topic.
So I'm glad Kenny does recognize the difference between like sexuality and marriage, but I want an honest answer, all right? I wanted to give you 2 sentences, all right? John and his wife went on vacation. John and his husband went on vacation. Which one of those do you think a lot of people are going to say introduces sexuality? There's a correct answer. There's a correct answer.
John and his husband.
And an honest one. You can just say,
so
even if you don't believe it, you can just say the truth, you know?
Like even if you personally don't believe it.
Yeah.
Do you think
No, I'm not going to assume what people are going to say about that.
Okay, I think
Come on, man.
I think a reasonable
Come on,
person
Come
would
on,
assume
man.
that more people are going to assume
Thanks
that
for
the
being
second
Joe
one
Biden.
is introducing sexuality. And so, with the language of this bill, it doesn't have
Guy's
to
so
have like the
fu-
most
he's-
To
catastrophic
me,
consequences.
neither of them says that. I just
This
want
guy's
you guys to
fucking
know.
That's what I'm glad that you
swagless,
think
bro.
that one of them introduces sexuality. I'm glad that you think that genuinely.
if you
I'm not
were
being
Joe
facetious,
Biden.
But a lot of parents
Fuck,
want to
man.
decide when they talk to their children about this, when they get to decide when their children like learn about gay people. Are going to see the second one as introducing sexual orientation.
It's the first
into the
funny
classroom.
thing that's happening.
And it doesn't have to be catastrophic in its
Fucking
consequences. Just the
swag
notion
black
that
hole.
certain
Should I
topics,
call him
certain
that? I think
queer
I might.
topics are taboo. Pick up on that. When this is introduced and that like queer identities and queer topics are more taboo, that's kids do pick up on that. It can feel like this, like, wait, am I different? Or wait, are gay people different?
Should I tell
It
them
doesn't-
I'm
it's not
riding with
just for
Biden?
queer kids that we're doing this bill. It's also for like everyone. Like we want everyone to like be queer positive and not be super homophobic and not be super transphobic. And this is like they're picking up on that too. Like, oh, I can't talk about the that teachers don't want us talking about gay or trans kids. Or gay or trans people, that must mean there's something wrong and weird with them. So it doesn't have to cause like direct antagonism. The reinforcing of those queer identities being taboo.
Suck swag into
enough.
it.
And the fact,
We're all
and it also,
swagless for
like,
him
you
being
don't-
here.
even
We don't
if
have less
something is
swag.
thrown out, Like, if a parent brings up a complaint and it's thrown out and there's no consequences, no legal consequences for the teachers that bring that stuff up, that's still not nothing, right? Why would a teacher like volunteer? Like, there's a children's book out there, like Heather Has Two Mommies, very very age appropriate, talks about love and talks about like accepting and inclusion and stuff like that. Really really age appropriate, and yet a lot of people are going to object to that. And even if a parent complains and nothing comes of it, why would a teacher go through that? Have you talked to teachers? They hate parents, justifiably. Parents are horrible, almost as horrible as children. But why would they even bother bringing it up? This is going to have a really, really stifling effect on free speech, because teachers, ironically, are afraid of the mob coming after them if they even just toe the line on what is and is not appropriate for kids.
Okay, one, teachers have limited rights on free speech. For example, they can't share their religion with other people.
That's not true.
That's not true.
What?
They can't.
I taught, if you want to ask.
You can get sued as a teacher if you share your religion with other people.
That's also not
just
true.
true. You look it up.
I am a teacher.
So
that is not true.
So
He's
that
a
is
teacher.
number
That is
one.
not true.
Number one.
Jangle's a teacher. That is
Okay,
not true.
well,
let's let Kenny
No,
finish.
What state do you live in where that's true? You live in
wait,
California, right?
There have been multiple lawsuits about teachers proselytizing to their students, and the parents of what? Parents are not okay with that too. Number two, I wouldn't assume that teachers hate parents. A lot of teachers are parents. They want their children to be raised in a good environment.
I was joking.
There was a teacher at my old school who moved to taught at my school so that his kid could go to my school, because my school was better than where she lived. Teachers care about these kids too. Okay? And I don't think a teacher would want to teach sensitive subjects about sexuality between kindergarten and third grade. Why would you?
Is it sensitive?
That's not comfortable to the teacher to really teach those kinds of things.
I'm pretty
It's their job.
The core of my assertion here.
The
core of my assertion there is like, why is it sensitive to bring up the book Heather Has Two Mommies? Why is that sensitive? Why should that be sensitive? Why is my family a sensitive topic for other parents?
What are you talking? Are you referencing a real incident? Heather Has Two Mommies.
Heather Has Two Mommies is a 1989 book about a kid who has two moms, introducing the concept that there are different kinds of families out there. It's meant for
now
children.
We're just debating books, and I don't want to debate books.
No,
I want to debate
what?
Don't you cop out of that, you coward.
One at a time.
Let me finish. A teacher who is responsible for teaching math and science, who got his degree in reading, who got his degree in English, who got his degree in math, is not qualified to teach about sex. They just aren't. I'm sorry.
Why are you bringing up sex now?
I do not want a teacher who got his degree in math to be teaching or to be explaining things about sexuality to my K through third grade child. End of story.
Okay, we're gonna go next. Do you want to respond to that quickly, Kevin? But we got to go down the list.
I just want to say, like, you'll see this from conservatives across the board, social conservatives, when actually pressed on it to basically admit why they find it sensitive or whatever. Like, let's just be real. It's because they have a different standard of legitimacy and humanization for straight couples and everybody else. In other words, goobercons think, ooh, icky, that's degenerate. Just be honest is my point. Just be honest about it.
No. If you're encountering those goobercons, they don't represent me, and they're probably no. I stated my position very clearly.
You're carrying water for
I
them,
do not want you
whether
to
they're you or
my
not.
position.
It doesn't matter. You're carrying water for them. I'm just telling you that. In your obfuscation of the actual material here that we're discussing. So.
I've never gone
the bill doesn't actually say anything about
this entire debate, and I don't want you to do it on me.
Okay, so we're gonna go back to the list. We have 4 names left on the list. It's Jake. This is the next one. Then it's Merrick, Joe, then Taft. Then we have to go to the last topic because it is getting late.
Okay.
Last username. I see you raising your hand. Can you wait till ending statements or no? Okay.
Wait, Dylan.
Okay. Kenny's position seems to be on the assumption that like parents are good at parenting. Like, how many of you have like the experience where your parents just fucking nailed that shit? You know what I mean? Like, parents are fallible and they don't know everything, and you just appealed to authority 2 seconds ago about teachers not being able to teach sex ed. What do you mean? Just because your mom and dad porked once, like, and the mistake that became you came out of the womb doesn't mean they're experts on fucking. You know what I mean? It's not like teachers don't have similar experiences, and also teachers, by the way, go to school to learn how to teach people concepts. I don't know if you understand that. So like they're professionals at teaching people information. That's the point of their degree. Like, you would want someone able to give the curriculum, not their opinion, the official curriculum you would hope that a state would have of a comprehensive sexual education platform. And that's a progressive thing that goes throughout education. That starts with kids in K through 4, because you want those kids to be able to know about things like consent, not about sex specifically, but about consent, their bodily autonomy, the fact that whatever, you know, them learning, like, hey, if you have private areas, if someone tries to fucking touch you and you don't want them to, they don't get to just because they're in charge. You need to teach this kind of stuff, because ignoring it allows spaces for predators to get in, and allows other peers to prey on each other. It allows for, I mean, you just see the systemic experience of anybody who doesn't look like me, basically, and who doesn't present mask often has, especially developmentally. Like, have you looked at the statistics that non-men have, like, when it comes to, like, sexual assault and things like that? There's a reason that happens, because we're not educated. There's a lot of ignorance, and that leads to a lot of people doing a lot of bad things to each other. Systemically, as a country, irrespective of your political belief, you should want a country that has an informed populace on the important topics that make up our social fabric. And I don't think it's weird to say sex, sexuality, gender, those are all very important things to that. And especially if you want someone like the family unit to keep going. Like, if you want families to happen, if you want this, you want anybody to be able to have that, regardless of the makeup of that family, right? That at least from an economic perspective, that's like what the Republicans bang the hammer about, right? So you're bang the drum about. You'd want that. So this all feeds into that, but you guys you cut yourself off the knees because you're not capable of like understanding these very simple concepts about, like, people are just people, and, like, I don't know. Yeah, I see your hand. You're like, go ahead.
Name one state-sponsored sex ed curriculum that teaches children between K through 3.
What do you mean by sex ed? Because I don't think that they do a good job in any state relative to my standards.
Yeah, relative to your standards. There's no state-sponsored curriculum in the entire United States that teaches K through 3.
That's not necessarily true, because it doesn't have to be branded. That's not true. It's not true. It doesn't have to be.
You're misrepresenting. You don't have the information.
That's not what you're thinking. Sex. Hold on, Kenny.
I'll save it for my time.
You have a misconception about what sexual education is. You think sexual education is diagrams of dicks and explaining how they go in and cause people to be pregnant, and then they talk about STDs or something. That is not what sexual education is. Sexual education is a comprehensive education pathway that can start as early as K, but they're not talking about the explicit stuff that you talk about with someone that's gone through puberty or that's post-puberty or anything like that. You talk about things, again, like consent, bodily autonomy, sexual health, how to be, like, a clean person.
Sexual health?
Yes, sexual
in
health.
Kindergarten?
I don't mean sex. Again, I don't. Like their physical body, dude.
So you don't mean sexual health.
You don't understand what that term means when you use it. You're just saying when I say sexual health, you heard how to have sex healthily. You know what I mean? That's not what that means. That's not what I'm saying. If you want to, if you want to, I mean, the real definition of this is like how it's used is anything that has to do with their sexual functions, because I mean, kids do have genitals. That kind of stuff, like, hey, you need to be clean, don't let anyone touch you that's not supposed to, stuff like that. Like it's just very simple stuff. You'd never really talk about sexual things until you're approaching puberty age, in that, like, anything that would fuck with your sensibilities. The only thing that seems to be about this bill seems to be about the interaction of what they assume is the norm with straight kids interacting with queer folk. Like what do trans teachers do, dude? They just don't explain to their kids when someone goes, hey, like a mid-transition teacher, like they're just supposed to just not exist, dude, because they have to be able to talk about this stuff.
What you said is not sexual education. About having people not touch you, that's just decency. Like,
that's not just decency. It needs to be taught, because clearly it happens in society, dog.
Yeah, then
like what?
Decency.
Oh, why are we talking about
No,
sex
then
ed
that's
in the first
decency.
place?
I would not put that in a sexual ed curriculum. That's not what that is.
That literally is. Yeah,
Anyway.
it's
No,
like
but
the
that's-
core
that's
of the
because you don't
conversation.
understand what
Yeah.
comprehensive means.
Jesus
You know,
Christ.
Okay,
Well,
wait,
we
wait,
don't
okay,
even have to be talking
wait,
about
wait,
this.
wait. Okay, stop. We're derailing. We need to wrap up the topic. So I want to go through the last three people, which is Merrick, Joe, then Taft. Then we're going to do very short ending statements because we want to get to CRT. One of the fellows here wrote a book about it, for God's sakes. Okay, Merrick.
Yeah, I mean, I guess when I raised my hand earlier, I was just sort of it felt very strange that all of a sudden it was being talked about as though I was like catastrophizing the situation and saying this bill is going to make all of the trans kids die or something, which is like not even remotely close to what I was saying. So I thought that that was a little weird that I was spoken to like I said that when I like very clearly didn't. What I did say to you was that when we have instances of affirming care, that it decreases suicidal ideation and suicide attempts
heart
by
rate still
certain
hasn't dropped.
percentages. And the thing is, I'm not just pulling this out of nowhere. We have a ton of studies that show this. So I'm not saying, oh, if this bill goes into place, all of the trans kids are going to kill themselves. I'm pretty sure I didn't even make it seem like I was saying that. So I really don't appreciate the acting like this bill won't cause any harm when we know that if there is no affirming care, things like suicidal ideation do go up. This is a fact. It's not my opinion, and you can act like I'm fear-mongering, but there are multiple studies that show this, so I think it's really disrespectful to call the actual facts that we have data for fear-mongering. That's really all I wanted to say. I obviously missed a lot of the conversation. I do apologize about that, but I think that's what I raised my hand for a long time ago.
Okay. Next, it's over to Joe.
In the state of California, I think that's where you're from, Kenny. Sexual health education is described as, I'm quoting here directly from a government website. I can send you the link if you like. Education regarding human development and sexuality, including education on pregnancy, contraception, and sexually transmitted infections. HIV prevention education is defined as instruction of the nature of human immunodeficiency virus, HIV and AIDS, methods of transmission strategies, and reduce the risk of HIV infection and social and public health issues with HIV and AIDS. In the state of California, they are obligated from grades 7 through 12 to have a comprehensive sexual health education. This is not happening in the grades that you are afraid of. Additionally, in the state of New Jersey, there's a comprehensive state mandates of what you can teach regarding social and sexual health. And you want to know the things that you're going to learn by the grade 2? Conflicts between people occur, and there are effective ways to resolve them. Communication is the basis of strengthening relationships and resolving conflict between people. People have relationships with others in the local community and beyond. Families shape the way we think about our bodies or health and our behavior. Every individual has unique skills, qualities, which can include the activities they enjoy, such as how they may dress, their mannerisms, and things they like to do. Additionally, on top of that, in the state of California, they're explicitly clear about LGBTQ plus exclusivity. So much so that they have a separate piece of paper, a separate document, all 4 pages, about how to navigate in terms of opting out a particular education, sexual health education, that you deem inappropriate. But it's explicitly clear how these guidelines work. Within the state of California, that does not exist. Now, even to your points that you argued earlier, which were explicitly, parents have more rights over children than teachers, that already exists in an overwhelming majority of states. I would implore you to show me one state where teachers have more authority than parents, and also sexuality should not be taught in K through 3. That already happens, and the bill doesn't encompass that. And then you said, if it reflects those 2 problems, I'm fine with it. You, sir, are not fine with the bill, and you've just been arguing for the sake of arguing, which is totally fine. But you gotta recognize that these points that you have been presenting and have to some level of proximity, and even to last username to a level of proximity, that these are things that opposition groups have acknowledged to be issues, have presented evidence to be issues, have challenged in the courts to be issues, challenged at the school district level to be issues, and this is just political LARPing to try to look optically good on the internet. Like, if you want to do that, that's fine, and you're more than welcome to do that, but don't just say things that are demonstrably not true and then smile like you think you're going to concoct some gotcha in your closing.
I want to give Kenny an opportunity to respond to that if he wants.
Well, if I wanted better optics, I wouldn't have come on
You
this
pet
show.
the cat?
I've come because I genuinely want to debate these issues with you guys. It seems like what we've come
There you
is
go.
that sexuality.
cat.
It seems like, I mean, unless the audience, and I'm going to give this up to the audience, not to any one of you guys. If you think teaching about, if you know, having conflict resolution and having people not touch you is indicative of a sex ed curriculum, specifically a sex ed curriculum, then maybe you have a point. But I don't think that's what sex ed is. Sex ed is actually teaching about safe sex, you know, building that your hormonal body structure, everything like that. That's sex ed. So in that sense, that should not be taught between K through 3.
Please, please,
Okay.
please.
Nope. I'm sorry, Jangles. We have to wrap up. And the last person on the list, you have an outro. It will be like 30 seconds. Taft, you're the last person on the list.
Muted.
Taft, this
muted,
point is
muted.
so good. I just wish I could hear it.
Okay, yeah, my point's incredible. Get this. I have a wonderful, wonderful girlfriend, and someday I'm going to marry her and get a ranch in Oklahoma, and we're gonna have a dozen children.
It's fucked.
And I think it's my responsibility to navigate difficult and controversial subjects with those children. I don't think that it's right for me to delegate all of that responsibility to the state. And I think it's really the responsibility of raise their children and to teach them things like consent. I think that's important, and I think that's part of sexual education. So I sort of think that, like, if you are a parent who's really concerned with making sure that these basic topics are taught to your children, you should be able to teach those things, and you can. So I think a lot of like some of the liberal fear mongering about this is a little bit overblown, because ultimately, like, you can still teach your children these things. And the bill doesn't ban like any discussion of this in school. It bans very specifically discussion up to 8th or up to 3rd grade, which is about 8 years old. And it's banning it from teachers down. So students can still discuss it. You can still have, you know, these talks in the classroom, but you know, it's not the teachers who are doing it. I think there are problems with this bill. They've been laid out pretty well, but I also think the bill is probably being overstated as far as how dangerous it
Make
is.
better individual choices.
Okay.
Damn right.
Now I'm going to throw it to the outro segment. Try to keep it as short as possible, like literally 30 seconds. I do want to get to the last topic. I'm tired. Everyone else is tired. Or maybe it's just me, who knows. Thank you all for making it a very easy night and making my job so simple. I'm going to throw it first to Merrick, who's messing on their phone.
Sorry, I was sending messages to your mods because I didn't want to flash it on my screen. I apologize. Yeah, so I guess my outro for this is, you know, I don't think that understanding the statistics around the suicidal ideation and the alienation that trans kids go through is fear-mongering. I actually think it's really important for us to understand why it's good that we have affirming care for queer people. I think that it's pretty obvious that when we have a very vague bill in a state where we have lots of conservative judges, we have lots of conservative parents, a state with a horrible track record on LGBTQ plus rights, a state where they did a survey of LGBTQ students, and a lot of them said that they felt very unsafe. Where we have a governor who says this can't be talked about. I think it is, like, it's pretty bad when we have a vague bill that gets at parents can sue if this stuff is discussed in the classrooms. I think that we should be explaining to our kids that gay people exist, that trans people exist, that these things are okay. We should normalize at a young age that it is okay to have minority identities. And I think that Jangles is right when he says a lot of people lie about their intentions for this bill. A lot of people lie about what's in the bill. I think Joe Lewis is correct when he points out that there are not a lot of standards for what is developmentally appropriate or not. And this opens the door for a lot of bad actors. And I think that there are very obviously a lot of bad actors circulating around this. I think a lot of the pushback is people who want to believe the best, but we can actually see the direction that legislation is going in this country, and I don't think it's great. We can see the abuse that trans kids and queer kids go through. I think that this bill should be opposed. That's my ending statement.
Okay, I'm going to throw it now over to Kevin Castley.
Thanks, Dylan. So very quickly here. So basically, it was brought up, liberal fear-mongering, all of this sort of stuff. Very ironic considering the fact that the fear-mongering is mostly done by, as I say, goobercons with respect to the mere existence of people that aren't straight. So anybody LGBTQ.
Even if I agree with them.
And additionally, anybody that just doesn't conform to the set and narratives about what's a normal relationship or whatever. Another irony that was brought up was it was mentioned how we could all agree to not teach kids about kink or whatever, like that is an example. And it's like, but I don't even agree with that. There's actually a great irony in this, that in particular BDSM culture is a very strong consent culture around it.
Facts.
And in a place like Florida, which has a very strong rape culture, statistically speaking, maybe they could use some of that. So, I mean, maybe that makes you a radical or whatever, but I think the idea of goobercons accusing liberals of,
every time he says goobercon, I want to fucking die. I want to fold into myself.
So he said that this is a green screen or whatever. It's not a green screen, it's real. So yeah, it's all real, 100% real. Thank you.
He's got the books. He's got the little
books.
You got the little Empire State Building.
My bookshelf is real too.
Yeah, I got the Ukrainian flag colors. Slava Ukraini. Let's go.
Slava Ukraini. Glory to the heroes. Throwing it over to Taft. Again, amazing opinion. Once again, I'd love to hear.
Classic.
Well, okay, I'll just skip Taft for now then, and hopefully she'll figure out the unmute button. I got to throw it over to the last username.
I'll just remind everyone that this bill doesn't say anything contrary to its slang name. It doesn't say anything about homosexuality. It says sexual orientation. So, in principle, whatever restrictions are applied to instruction about homosexual stuff should also apply to heterosexual stuff. So if it's true that teachers are not, if a kid asks why does Timmy have two dads, the teachers are not allowed to say anything, then they shouldn't be allowed to say anything if the kid asks why does Timmy have a dad and a mom.
On that?
I doubt that's actually going to happen. Probably simple things like that. Teachers will probably be allowed to say, well, Timmy has two dads because some people have two dads, and that's okay. And you shouldn't, bully Timmy over that or anything like that, or whatever. Something that you can say to a little kid.
It's awful.
That's going to, make Timmy's life not hell. And if the kid asks tougher questions, like, where did Timmy come from if he has two dads, then maybe the teacher has to say, you know what, ask your parents or wait till you're in grade 4 and we're allowed to tell you. And I don't actually see a problem with that. I think that should be the answer for two dads or a dad and a mom or whatever. Like, I don't think it's actually the place
when they close one of the
teacher
bridges,
to
you gotta just play the story mode to get
kids,
to that point.
To give kids detailed instruction, or at least it shouldn't be.
I should say that.
I'm fine with that not happening until grade 4. Like, I don't actually see the problem with this bill. If it's not interpreted as it's written, if it's interpreted in a way that's biased towards heterosexuality, then I will be right with you in saying in condemning that and saying that's not that fair.
It's the DLC shit.
But if it's enforced and interpreted as it's written here, then I don't see a problem with it. So I don't think there's a problem with the bill itself. It seems entirely reasonable to me.
Okay, throwing it over now to Kenny.
Don't yell at Kenny challenge. Let's do it.
Yeah.
You think we can?
It's a parental rights bill. It's parents should have more rights over teachers. Teachers need to get consent to teach about sensitive sexual topics, and sexuality should not be taught between K through 3rd grade.
Why do you need parental consent?
Does not preclude the right to teach about marriage, does not preclude parents from teaching kids their own beliefs about sexuality.
Absolutely.
All of that is fine under the bill.
They would get sued for that. Absolutely.
But
that would be a
but
court
as
case.
far
Are you kidding
as
me?
allowing, as far
100%
as
there's gonna be a
making
court
sure
case
that
against gay fucking teachers and
that these
shit.
rights for parents are enumerated and everything like that, and making sure that sexual education is restricted to a more developmentally appropriate stage, I think it does its job.
Okay, I'm gonna throw it over to Jangles.
So Kenny, I'm sorry, I'm going to pick on you. I know it's really, really tough being like the biggest dissenting voice, but I am going to pick on you a little bit here. So he did what all conservatives, proponents of this bill does. It says sexual education. The bill doesn't talk about sexual education. We've made it about sexual education, but last username said, "Oh, it doesn't say homosexuality," even though, come on, y'all, we know better. It also doesn't say sexual education. Control F it, go to the bill. It doesn't talk about sexual education. The actual line is classroom instruction by school personnel or third parties on sexual orientation or gender identity may not occur in kindergarten through grade 3. That doesn't talk about sexual education. In fact, Democrats tried to get it. They tried to change that to sexual education. They tried to change it to the exact thing you wanted. And the Republicans shot it down because it wasn't about sexual education. It was about conflating sexual orientation, which means gay people, and gender identity, which means trans people, with sexual activity and with grooming. You can see that in how the actual press secretary and proponents frame it as the anti-grooming bill. This has nothing to do with sexual education. It has to do with demonizing gay and trans people. And I think you know that. And I think anyone who says, like, oh, it doesn't say gay, come on.
Well,
Like,
100% Kenny's being a slime ball here,
that's
right?
it.
Okay, I'm gonna throw it over to Joe Lewis. Duma.
Thank you.
Stay tuned.
The bill on its face should be repealed. The state legislature in Florida is clearly made of children who don't know how to create bills for the things that they want.
Facts.
So something else of note, 'cause I have it here, and we didn't talk about it, but the Morning Consult with Politico did a poll in terms of the leanings on this bill, and on the face of the printout, and you can go see it on the Political Consult site. It's like, oh, half of voters back limits on teaching of LGBTQ issues in schools. But that doesn't necessarily tell the case, because 68% of Republicans said they support limiting issues of sexual orientation and gender identity after 3rd grade to age-appropriate discussions. From independents, it's 31% in support, and Democrats is of 37% support. Then the banning of teaching of sexual orientation and gender identity in K through 3rd grade, 70% of Republicans, 46% of independents, and 35% of Democrats are in support of that. And then the final line, allowing parents to sue school districts over alleged violations of sexual orientation and gender identity discussions in schools. 55% of Republicans support it, 33% of independents support it, and 32% of Democrats support it. When it comes to this bill, it was clearly a partisan job to try to position Ron DeSantis into some degree of political power in the 2022 landscape and beyond. And to say anything otherwise, when we know that the culture war right now is about critical race theory, gender affirmation, and pronouns, just tells me you're not serious or you're trying to sell something.
Okay, I'm gonna throw it to Jake.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say the same thing. I think someone who is like, if you're a right wing proponent of this bill and others like it, and you deny like what it's about, like it's just slimy, dude. It's just like, I don't understand why we have to be slimy about it. Just say it with your whole chest what you mean. You don't have to obfuscate. We could just talk about the issue, and then we could actually be like having an honest discussion about, how to move forward. But instead it's just like weird politicization of like this culture war bullshit. It's an anti-gay, anti-trans bill targeted at it's like trying to push them out of any sort of social consciousness. It's othering them, and it makes kids, whether you realize it or not, that makes them have a bias towards people of these. Like, when you other people from a systemic point of view, it makes people within that system act accordingly. It teaches them prejudicial acts. I understand that you maybe there's a part of you that isn't being spineless about this and is like you actually believe the things you're saying. But then I agree with Joe. It sounds like you just aren't a serious person. So it's weird. Like I really don't know how you reconcile those things. I do mean to pick on you, by the way. I don't mean to be an asshole, but I do mean to pick on you.
Now we're going to go into the last topic. The last time you can address the former topic is in the intro to this topic. So if anybody said something towards you, this would be the last time you can address it. The last topic is critical race theory.
Just to be clear.
Specifically, we've seen that it's become a bigger and bigger issue. It was a big issue during the race in Virginia that many people think helped determine the outcome. And so it's we're going back to the old hit and boast critical race theory, and it's quite simple. The question is, what do you think of it? Do you think it's a major issue? Do you think it has anything to do with it? Is it of any importance? Is it nothing burger, etc.? I'm going to start in the bottom right hand corner with Taft.
Great. I will quickly address the previous discussion topic just because I was yelling at my chat, so I missed closing remarks. I don't know if anyone else grew up. I don't know if anyone else in this panel grew up as a trans kid or transitioned during school, but I did. I went through that, and never once did I felt like I required the professor or the teacher to sit down in the class and give like a lecture on my pronouns or what was going on with my transition. So I think like when we conflate gender affirming care or like the ability to use pronouns or a preferred name in school with K through third education on sexual orientation or gender identity, it just feels a little bit disingenuous, especially like when I think about my own lived experience and how that went. In regards to critical race theory and the remarks Trump said,
but like, what if you do need it though? You know what I mean? What if you did need it?
Collecting quotes from critical race theory authors, people in legal studies who have talked about it. And I think I realized
what a fucking privileged position.
The more I researched that when Trump is talking about critical race theory, he's not using the term in this intellectual way. And I don't think that most of his supporters who are cheering for him in the background are really thinking about Kimberly Crenshaw or Robert DiAngelo or any of these critical race theory scholars. I think what we've seen
and like
is
an appeal to id poll immediately,
you know whatever they don't like about woke or progressive race politics onto this broader label of critical race theory. And to the extent that the progressive views on race are incredibly, I think, toxic and harmful and not productive, I think that what Trump is saying as far as fighting those viewpoints is probably correct. And if we want to have a conversation about the intellectual parts as well, you know, those are pretty awful as well. And the whole, you know, the study of critical race theory, I think it's something that doesn't need to be banned. Because frankly, I don't have a problem with critical race theory being taught in schools. The problem is when critical race theory is taught by true believers, by people who take as part of their critical race theory teaching the ideas of praxis and the need to proselytize these beliefs. Controversial ideas need to be taught in schools. That applies to Stalinism, Maoism, ideas that killed millions of people, but they shouldn't be taught by Stalinists or Maoists. And so when critical race theory is taught, my expectation is only that it's
basketball should be taught by hockey players, chat,
and that the people teaching it aren't people who
you'll really learn the ins and outs.
So that would be my position on the theory.
Superpower broadcasting.
That's fascinating. Yeah, it's so fascinating that she has the opposite
CRT,
opinion.
Something we talked about before. It's generally, if we're going to define CRT as, you know, mostly a graduate law school sort of set of courses or the scholarship around that. I've got some issues with it in terms of
this guy going to talk about oogly boogly?
As it relates to objectivity and everything and whatnot, but the meme
me and my
of it,
friend
though,
Jackson
is kind
Maximum
of conflated with just recognizing
every Thursday
that
at 6
racism is a
p.m.
problem.
Central Time.
And so I'm not as
5 p.m.
anti-CRT,
Mountain.
if we're talking about the meme of CRT, basically that racism is bad. It's like, okay, racism is bad. To Donald Trump's point, he said, and I quote, the fate of any nation ultimately depends upon the willingness of its citizens to lay down, and they must do this, lay down their lives to defend their country, unquote.
This is what
with
we're debating,
respect to CRT. Not only is that hysterical, it's also profoundly dumb, considering the fact that his own son admitted that he got financing for his golf courses from the biggest threat to the United States, fascist Russia, and he owes a lot of money, potentially in the order of billions, to a country aiming 8,000 nuclear weapons at the United States. But he's going to say, lay down your life, not his life, right? Like, he sends his supporters to do January 6th. He goes back home. He doesn't walk with them. He doesn't storm the Capitol with them. Lay down your life over a meme. Well, that's pretty goofy. So.
Okay, I'm going to throw it over to Merrick.
Yeah, so when we talk about CRT, as both Taftaj and I'm really sorry, broadcasting just noted, there is the legal, and then there's the colloquial usage of it. And really CRT is looking at our history, it's looking at legislation, it's looking at the history of this country, and how that has affected certain demographics of people based on their race, and how that intersects with our legal system. So that's what CRT is. Now, this is absolutely correct to note that CRT gets labeled to be anything that conservatives don't like to do with race or black people. So there's definitely different there's different meanings of this. Trump's comments today, I also do not believe relate to CRT as how the history of racial the racial history of this country, how that intersects with the law. I don't think that's what Trump means when he says that. I think that Trump is just being racist, and I think that Trump is putting forth a call to his followers to do things like get rowdy in school boards if people want to talk about like segregation. We can also see this reflected, and the reason why I think that it's like that explicit is because we can see this reflected in Republican conversations about this subject. I actually read the bill, I think it's Senate Bill 3 for Texas. We read that today, and basically what the bill says is that you can't teach anything in class, you can't talk about anything in class that relates to race or sexual orientation, and you can't teach kids anything that's connected to like a political or a social movement that's deemed deferential in any way. Again, written really vague. We've seen a series of bills. There's 36 states right now that are pushing forward bills that try to limit or actually completely curtail the state's ability to teach things about race. And about the history of racism in this country. That's over 70% of states, by the way. So, yeah, I think that his comments about this are very clearly just racist. They don't like that we teach about racism, and they think that it leads to anti-white hatred and blaming white people and making white people feel bad, which, I mean, yes, there are some, like, really cringe, I think, liberal lesson plans. There's been some cringe books written, but that's not really reflective of what CRT actually is, which is coming to terms with our past and examining how that affects racial demographics today in conjunction with our legal system, which is absolutely something that we should take into consideration if we care about things like racial justice and not locking up an enormous percentage of the Black people in our country unfairly. So yeah, I think his remarks are really kind of terrifying.
Okay, I'm going to throw it over to last username.
Critical race theory. The main thing that critical race theory seems to be interested in is how to make anything racist. It's a way to make anything racist and anybody racist. And the problem with that is that the way it makes anything racist is just by showing that it has some sort of disparate effect on races, right? It disproportionately affects races. And the problem with that is that doesn't actually help you necessarily solve the problem. If you're lucky, it might actually matter in the solution of the problem, but usually, generally speaking, it doesn't. Because it doesn't get to the cause of the problem. And so the reason
What's the cause
CRT is so destructive is because it distracts people from actually being able to solve problems by trying to make everything about race, even when it's not, even when making it about race is not actually going to be useful in solving problems. So it makes it harder to solve problems. That's my big problem with CRT. There's some other smaller problems, but that's the big one.
Question mark.
Okay, now I'm going to throw it over to Kenny.
What? Behaving last. I should be just all the guests. I think that's what it should be. I should be all the guests.
In terms of whether critical race theory should be taught in schools.
Okay.
If a theory is false,
dude, this guy
it
sounds
shouldn't
like
be taught in schools.
scuffed as fuck.
And critical race theory is false.
Streak.
So it shouldn't be taught in schools.
1 month streak.
That's my position. Here's why it's false. Okay.
Who else is out of
You
Cubs?
say that America,
great
that the
time.
state of affairs in America is racist. Okay. What are you going to do with Asian Americans? Doesn't make any sense. America's a racist country against minorities, yet Asians are the highest earning demographic in this country.
Working in that plug.
They're also the demographic with the highest education, bachelor degree attainment in this country. Look, it's my book, An Inconvenient Minority.
Thank you. You want Anakin?
You know, I'm here to sell it. That's fine. You can blame me all you want for that, but it's true. It's true. The reality is that America is not a racist country. America is still a country where people who work hard, build useful skills, can actually achieve and climb the rungs of success in this country. And Asian Americans prove it.
That's right.
How do Asian Americans get to the top? Because they study. They study twice as many hours as the average American. They have higher two-parent family structures. They have lower rates of crime, higher rates of discipline. So this is a cultural thing. These are things that anybody of any race can accomplish.
I'm just waiting my turn to strike like a viper.
Black Americans
I got a banger,
join
dude.
the military. Military Black Americans do just as well as whites in this country.
Whites.
They actually do in most rates.
We love
what
a
it
good
shows
white.
is that cultures of success are real, even within and without races, even between races.
Do I have a book
So
to
you
sell?
cannot
No.
dichotomize society on the basis of race. It's really bad to do that because there's so much variation, even internally within race, that the success principles and culture are what helps to drive you in this country, not your race. That's what we should be teaching students. That's why I oppose critical race theory. That's why I oppose critical race theory in education.
Okay, I'm going to throw it over to Jangles.
So we've been talking about critical race theory for, I think, the past 850 years, it feels like. There's been roughly 18.5 billion panels on critical race theory. Does it bother anyone else that every critical race theory panel starts out with a bunch of people admitting that critical race theory isn't actually critical race theory? Does that bother anyone else? Like that's the thing that everyone has to say. Like, well, we say critical race theory, but we don't actually mean critical race theory. We mean whatever we want it to mean. Oh, and critical race theory praxis. All right, it doesn't have to be the actual critical race theory. It's critical race theory praxis, which is literally anything that we decide it is. Whiteness, intersectionality, systemic racism, all that stuff's critical race theory because it's the critical race theory praxis. So
I'm having fun, man.
That bothers me a lot. But it all
these would be way better with 6 people.
I think it kind of
9 is too many, dude.
All right,
it's
where does
really
culture
too
come
many.
From? Is what
I'm gonna start
asking. Where does it
panels,
come
chat.
from?
Panels can be
Is
way
there
better.
possible? Is it
Make
possible
panels
that
great
history has
again.
influenced the cultures of certain people?
I'll make them
that
better.
has something to do, and that the cultures that previously were incredibly racist, that everyone admits are racist, might have lasting effects to today. So if we see groups of people who are not doing as well in society, is it cultural, and is it systemic? Is it outside factors? Is it environmental factors? If it's not any of those things, what is it?
It's time we make panels great again, bro.
Okay, I'm going to throw it over to Duma.
Yeah. One of the
Come on,
things
dude.
That Kenny would definitely agree with is that the encapsulation of the Asian demographic
He just
in the
can't get it
United
right
States
at
is
all.
incredibly insufficient. And we understand this even when we look at the successes of Asian Americans. Because how can a group that has the highest percentile of earnings also have the highest wealth inequality gap among all racialized groups? We know that Asians are the highest earners, except for low income adults. Then they are just in the same line as they are demographically: white, Asian, Hispanic, black. And then we will also look at the dichotomy of how ethnicity matters in these demographics, where we understand that when we start breaking down Asian ethnicities, we start seeing that, okay, maybe the racial categorization in the United States allows it to be where we might be able to use information to mislead that a racialized group is successful in America as a means to undermine other racialized groups for things that the dominant society deems culturally or socially unacceptable. I'm done having this conversation about critical race theory. We understand what the dog whistles are. We have the FOIA requests, the hundreds of thousands of dollars that conservatives spent on this. I'm done with that conversation. We know what they're targeting. They're targeting social emotional learning and diversity, equity, inclusion. And I'm more than happy to talk about those things and how it manifests itself in society. But we got to stop acting like this is just a perpetuation of the exact same talking points that they did in the 30s to the 50s to the 70s to the 80s and today. There's different analysis of what's going on in society, and there's different scholars and individuals approaching these issues and trying to solve them. There's nothing wrong with that. But to fall for the trap that you could get a full encapsulation and understanding of
He likes more drama. No,
one incredibly
I don't think he's
niche
even
subject
farming
matter
for drama. He won't
is
let me
just a waste
talk.
of time. So I'm more than
See?
happy to talk about like the things that they were trying to target, which was
he's
trying to
not
get
looking for
critical race
drama right
theory
now.
out of schools. But at the same time, you would be arguing against SEL and DEI. And we're more than happy to talk. I'm more than happy to talk about that. We can dissect like what's good for children and how that can be better for children and young adults. But by and large, that's what people are arguing about with CRT. And they admitted it as such. Another thing of note, I am very concerned that despite the fact that parents fought so hard to push this idea that they are not domestic terrorists in school board meetings, that Donald Trump would have the audacity to tell his base that they need to lay down their very lives to defend this country, when Republicans have relentlessly tried to change the narrative around that, is antithetical to what Republicans wanted to happen. They wanted to paint parents as just ordinary folks just going and expressing their opinions, and this undermines that, and we have to acknowledge that. Like what Donald Trump said was dangerous not only for Republican parents but all parents broadly, because parents by and large, they argue this. If you go to Loudoun, to Sarasota, to any city in California, it's the exact same thing. Most of these parents are apolitical and they just want what's best for their children, and they should address that. Donald Trump, with these type of statements, is hindering that.
Okay, now we'll throw it over to Jake.
Unmuted. Got it. I had an outburst. I apologize, Dylan. There seems last username said specifically something about like how CRT like drives a wedge, and there's like other ways to address the problem. Like, what? How do you solve racism? Like, this is like when teaching a culture about a thing, it helps to discuss it and why it happens. And if you don't do that, what's the answer then? Because that's really what you said. Everything's race. It really, that's not like what happens in those discussions, because we're talking about like the colloquial CRT and clearly not what's being taught in colleges and stuff. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking about this in schools or something. Like, it doesn't make any sense. And according to Kenny, apparently the like Crazy Rich Asians, the movie, just defeated racism or something. Like, Asian people having any sort of success within the country is not to say that there's no racism expected. It's like the only bar for subjugation is not how well you do insofar as your relation to capital or whatever, dude. Like, that's not the only way that someone can be subjugated. It's just a weird way to go about it. And then you're your solution seemed to be, or at least part of your solution was to really endorse black folks like going to the military or something. Like, do you think maybe it would help if you're really pro-military and you want people to like get financial freedom through military service? Wouldn't it help to have like people there that want to be there because they value the country and value the I guess the values that the country holds, instead of like literally just holding a monetary carrot in front of them? Wouldn't you want people to join that, not just because it's like the only way out of poverty, which shows it illustrates a terribly inefficient and like just a predatory system that capitalism is, especially in regards to how it interacts with the military. Like, none of this sounds productive at all. It all, like, all of these are the problems that a lot of like people over on this side of the aisle are like, yeah, that's an issue. That's part of the problem. You're just like, no, more of the bad stuff. It doesn't seem to make any sense. As far as Donald Trump's concerned, I mean, obviously, this isn't the first time he's incited folks, and it's always dangerous. It works, though, on his people.
I think that maybe if I could like interpret Kenny's viewpoint on this, I think that the argument would be that there are ways of operating and approaching success in the world that are conducive to long-term success and it allow you to overcome racial bias. So I think, I'm guessing, hoping that everyone in this panel acknowledges that like there is racism in this country and abroad, and it's a problem, and it's going to be a problem continuing into the future. And so what we want to do is we want to find solutions that allow people to succeed and overcome that. Right.
Wait, what do you? We keep saying this word "succeed" as if racism is like there's this made up sort of like straw man of what like the position is over here, that like racism keeps people from being successful. There's no way they can do anything successful. Like that's not really what's being said. It's just about a quality of life thing. That we're not talking about the barrier of success here. Like, what do you mean with success?
I mean,
you both mean capitally.
Elaborate.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at, for example, like the difference in like racial wealth gaps, that would be like an example
about
of something.
The same thing again.
Well, you want to address, right? You don't want there to be a big racial wealth gap, right?
No. Of course not.
Okay.
But that's systemic to capitalism in general. Like, that's a whole other discussion. It's not the only reason that you see disparities. It's about the systemic nature of how that works in relation to like the issues addressed by CRT and like the conversations around racism. That's how you fix the problem.
I think you're bringing up great points. I just want to finish what I was going to get at, explaining like my interpretation of Kenny's viewpoint. I've read Ibram X. Kendi's How to Be an Anti-Racist book, and he talks about the distinction in government policy between racist government policy, which he considers to be anything that either perpetuates or allows to continue, is basically race blind, isn't actively helping, one racial group to succeed or meet the same standards as another racial group. And then anti-racist policy, which is actively engaging in that kind of equitable search for an outcome, i.e. something like affirmative action, which actively biases in favor of one racial group in an attempt to address that racial equity problem. I think what Kenny would say is that you can take these government policy solutions and you can make some impact, right, in the disparity in racial wealth gap, right? But I think what he would argue is there is a more effective way than creating these biased government policies. And I think his solution might be, for example, like what he's getting at with like the military is that when you introduce like a cultural change in how someone operates, you get better outcomes. Is that a correct interpretation of your viewpoint?
Yeah, it is. It is. And thank you for saying that. I think this discussion. Hey, look, I agree with Jangles, who said that critical race theory discussions are always like way plagued in like misinterpretation. So why don't we just like come up with a good definition of critical race theory we all agree in right now, so that we can avoid this.
That's gonna be hard.
I think that so my definition of critical race theory is teaching, and you can disagree with it, is teaching racism in America as a normal state of affairs.
I don't care.
What do you think?
Part of it.
I don't care. Do you believe that we should be advocating for self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and like responsible decision making? Are those things that you support?
Joe, that's so incredibly vague. Like I have no.
How the fuck is that vague? Last username. Social
That
awareness.
could mean anything.
Self-management. Relationship skills.
Self-awareness.
And responsible decision making.
Okay.
I want Kenny to answer the question. That was the stupidest thing you said tonight. Last username. I love you, man.
Wait. Okay, jack it in. Okay, Jesus.
I'm trying to make a definition here. Okay. All right.
Okay.
Teaching about racism in America as a normal state of affairs. Critical race theory.
I don't care about critical race theory. I want you to answer my question. Do you believe that the things that I have posited to you just then are things that we ought to advocate for within communities, which are, I could say it again, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, responsible decision-making, and just advocating for this? Is that something that you support?
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I feel the same way as
Do you
Kenny.
think people should be able or learn and understand how to make responsible decisions in society? I can walk you through this for as slow as I need to.
So. I think so.
Absolutely.
So anyway,
Sure.
I don't think
Fantastic.
What does that have to
Next
do with
thing.
critical
Do
race
you
theory?
think that it is appropriate? Do you think that?
Wait. Okay, stop. Okay, you asked him a question. He wanted to explain his answer.
Okay, you can
He
allow
should be
it.
able
I'm
to
sorry.
explain his answer.
Go for it.
And then we have Merrick and Kevin Cassidy on the list. Just want to let them
Oh.
know that.
So,
Usually I'll give a thumbs up to let you know you're on the list. Okay, continue.
Thanks. Okay, I don't see much disagreement with my definition. I think it's a good definition. Look, the reality is
You won't engage. I'm done.
here's my double bind. Here's my double bind. Here's my
I'm done
argument.
with you. We can move on.
He's talking. Let him talk. Jesus
If
Christ.
America,
Thanks, Fallon.
if the normal state of affairs in America is racist
That's not
in nature, why are Asian Americans more successful than whites?
Why do Asian Americans
that's
have the
the-
largest wealth gap
that's the
amongst all
inconvenient
racialized groups?
minority.
Why do Asian Americans have
That's
the
the
largest wealth
inconvenient
gap?
minority.
Why do Asian
This is
Americans have
why
the
I
largest?
disagree.
Why do Asian Americans have the largest wealth gap among all racialized groups, Kenny? Why do they
Yeah,
have?
look,
that?
I actually.
Why is
marked
that?
this
Why
page
is that?
for you.
If they are the most successful group, why do they have the largest wealth gap?
Okay,
It's a big
let me
bar.
explain this to you right here.
I love
Very,
this.
very simple argument. See, look, these
I
are the
reviewed his
lowest.
book
These are the
with
highest
my-
poverty and lowest poverty Asian groups in America. Okay, lowest poverty Asian groups are Japanese, Korean, Chinese, Vietnamese, Filipino. Highest poverty are like Bhutanese, Burmese, Hmong, Cambodian. What unites those high poverty Asian groups? The fact that they've been here for less time. Hmongs came mostly in the 2000s. Cambodians came mostly in the 2000s. Chinese, Vietnamese,
Deep
they've been here
wave.
for much longer.
Thank you, dude. Appreciate
What has
it.
happened is not that wealth
Rhyme.
inequality has spiked and has created this great thing. It's that the people the Asians who've been in America for longer have gotten richer as a result of America. And then there's a poor influx of Asian Americans. But if the American experiment works
Holy
as it has
fucking
before,
shit, dude.
these Hmong and Cambodian Americans are going to end up doing just fine. Okay?
Well, based
that's
on
my
your
take.
book,
your
based
question
on your
was basically,
based on
how
your
can I
book-
be racist against black people?
Okay, both.
Yeah,
Okay, sorry.
It's
Sorry,
a pretty simple
just threw me
thing,
off.
Kenny.
There's two people
Yeah.
talking to him
Sorry.
at once. I want to make sure people get the response. So,
I think I've
Duma.
said enough on that. Go
okay.
ahead.
Do you
Duma
think
can
it's a
respond,
response?
but then I want to go to some of those lists. I'll write your name down, Jangles.
Do you think it's the onus of the Asian community to make sure that wealth inequality like that doesn't happen within their own communities? Or do you think that's something that should be exclusive amongst ethnic groups?
Okay, you make another misnomer that the Asian community is like taking care of all of the other Asians.
That's why I
Asian Americans
hold
are
on.
so-
Let me. You did not hear my question because maybe you didn't understand
just
it. So let
muted
me
1 second ago.
clarify
What do
it
you
for you.
Okay,
Do
say it
you
again.
believe that the ethnic groups should have the onus within their ethnic community to address these issues, including their wealth issues, or do you think that there's an onus on the Asian community more broadly to assist other ethnic minorities?
Bruh.
I think you're asking two separate questions, and the first question, the answer to that is no, and then the second
Randy,
question,
thanks
the answer to that
for
is
doing
also
freaking out,
no.
brother.
Great, we can move on from that.
Okay. Next, it's going to be Merrick.
Hey, so I wanted to address something that Kenny said earlier. And before I actually get into this, I want to make this very, very, very clear. I do not believe that, based on the interactions that I've seen from you so far, I don't think that you're a bigot. I don't think that you are a racist in any way. I don't think that you are a white nationalist. But you did say some... Excuse me?
I said thanks, that's a relief. Go ahead.
So, you said something that was, you believe that Black people simply have a bad culture, or that they have an inferior culture, or that they're, I believe that was what you said, that it's actually a cultural problem. And that you actually compared the Black community in America, the demographic of Black people, to Asian people in America. And this is like a core thesis of yours, right? You like to compare these two groups, and you say, okay, well, we can actually look at Asian Americans, and they're doing pretty well.
I think Merrick's
so then
throwing
when
a
we look
bone
at Black
here.
Americans, they're not doing really well. This is something that you point to
Thorpe?
often, yes?
I would say yes. Yeah, I point to that relatively often. Go ahead.
Okay. So this is actually, and I know you probably don't know this because I imagine you probably don't spend a lot of time talking to extremists. But this is actually a very, very, very common white supremacist extremist talking point. And so there's actually a lot of people that have explored this concept and have talked about why this might be the case. Now, I'm sure there's a number of reasons why Asian Americans do well, but there's also a lot of people who have examined why is it that Black Americans in this country seem to be lagging so far behind in terms of like economic inequality, why they have such a high rate of incarceration and things of that nature. So because this is something that we see a lot, I actually wanted to address this because I think a lot of people don't really know how to tackle this question. So we can actually look at things like policies that were implemented during the Reconstruction period. We can look at how, yes, there was sort of there was sharecropping, but there was also a lot of debt peonage, basically, that happened. And most of the people that ended up like de facto, like debt slavers during the Reconstruction period were Black people. It was actually 95% Black people, even after slavery ended. So this happened for quite some time during the Reconstruction period. And then afterwards, there was this idea that people would be given land, they would be Black people in this country would be given some sort of restitution.
This is not my real
this actually
face,
never
chat.
came through. So then as we
face is down in
proceed
the bottom
forward
right.
into American history, we have segregation, right? So we have things like the Jim Crow laws. We don't actually get the Civil Rights Act until 1964. There's actually a woman alive today. I'm sure you guys have actually heard her name. It's Ruby Bridges. Ruby Bridges was the first girl to go to a non-segregated school. She's alive. Her mother just died recently, actually. The last slave in this country, the last woman to be enslaved, she died in 2014 because we actually still had debt slaves, African American people that were literally enslaved by contracts until the year, I believe it was like 1963, actually. This was actually very common in certain parts of the South, and we don't really talk about a lot of this. So there's a lot of things that we can look at, even beyond Jim Crow. We can look at things like redlining. So redlining was a practice where Black people were not given home loans, so they weren't allowed to become homeowners, where they were not allowed to build wealth and capital. And one of the biggest predictors of success by the typical metrics that we consider for success in this country is actually the accumulation of generational wealth. So Black Americans are, because of actual legislation and because
say this shit all the time,
de jure attitudes towards them, de jure and de facto
this is a lot of what I was going to say,
attitudes
so I have
towards
nothing
them
to say now.
are one of the demographics that have been the most prevented from doing generational wealth accumulation in this country. So after we take a look at things like redlining, we can actually take a look at things like white flight, which is when people would move out of urban areas, white people would move out of urban areas, and they would move into suburbs where they were given better jobs, where better housing was built. And then we have property taxes, which are actually what pay for and fund schools, because the federal government doesn't actually fund the quality of schools. It's property taxes. So because of things like white flight, a lot of Black people continued to live in urban areas where their schools were dramatically underfunded because they didn't have the same jobs that white people had access to. And so things like this were because of like there was a lot more discrimination, but even still to this day, we can look at things like the extremely famous resume study which has actually been replicated. Even
Uh-huh.
past, well, there's actually a lot
I don't
more.
think
So
Kenny gives
even
one fuck.
past redlining,
I know.
Okay,
I know
yeah,
you could
but-
go on.
drugs,
I know.
I
know.
do. I do.
And-
I do.
Yeah,
And
I'm
I-
actually gonna
go ahead.
stop now, but I think that my point has been made that I could actually continue to talk to you about this for 10 more minutes. So when you ask why are Asian Americans doing better than Black Americans, it's because Asian Americans have not had the de facto and the de jure roadblocks that have been placed around the Black community for the last 400 to 500 years.
Preach.
Okay. Look, I'm going, and I'm going to keep this short because I want to let other people look. I'm going to agree with you in part. Okay. I agree with you in part. I don't agree with you in whole, but I agree with you in part. I disagree with some of the things
Wonder
that
which
you
part,
said.
chat.
But yeah, of course, like slavery had an effect.
I'm gonna ask him.
Of course, Jim
Really,
Crow
which-
had an effect
Okay, you can-
on Black Americans. Absolutely. Black American identity, Black
Apart,
cultural
huh?
identity, all of those kinds of things.
1960.
I totally agree. The solution should not be to me, and this is my argument is that the solution to help Black Americans to reach the levels of success and equity that we all want Black Americans to get to should not focus on repicking at those old wounds over and over
Jesus
again.
fucking Christ.
Rather, it should be focused on building up individual Black people,
Old
building up individual
wounds.
Black entrepreneurship, helping our public school system. You know, we spend 3 times as much money on public school education as we did in 1980, adjusted for inflation, mostly for Black and Hispanic children, and we haven't produced any results. Black education gap and math is still exactly the same as it was in 1980. That's a
Ruh-roh.
travesty. That is horrible.
That's
So
fantastic.
I think
and
that there
schools
are policies we need to do, but we need to figure out how to build up the Black individual, not rely on picking at old wounds.
and schools are more segregated now than they
These
were
are
at
not
peak Jim
old
Crow.
wounds.
These
We
are
can
not
actually look at
these
the
are
war on
not-
drugs, and then we can look at the actual prison populations that we have now. There's actually a book called The New Jim Crow that goes into a lot about this. That's actually the point I was making. These aren't old wounds. It's still continuing. It just happens in different forms. Also, some of these things that I just talked about, these are 2 generations away from where we are now. And again, as I said, the factors and things that predict success are the accumulation of generational wealth. So you're talking about old wounds, but that literally doesn't apply in this situation because it's not old wounds. It's current wounds that are still open that we've never actually sat down and been honest about and properly stitched up.
I want to jump in and agree with Merrick a little bit and maybe try to also build a bridge here. I think that we should acknowledge that there's a lot of historical instances of horrible, brutal, systemic racism, the effects of which are
Systemic
still
racism
felt
isn't
today.
slavery, dog.
And when you systematically deny people access to capital, to business investment, to the ability to develop strong, prosperous generational wealth that's passed down, you see these effects, manifest today. And there's this analogy that I'm sort of reminded of, and it's, if I get into a car accident and, the person totals my car and I'm paralyzed from the waist down,
It was a
that
system, but
person
I mean, that's
is
not what's
totally at
like,
fault, right? They've
just conflating
done something really horrible to me.
slavery.
Ethically, they're
with
totally in the
what
wrong.
systemic racism
And they should be
is. It's like systemic
expected
racism
to
is like
help facilitate
so much more
my,
than that.
my
It's
physical
so-
therapy
and you
that's
know that.
necessary to get, my legs working
It
again.
doesn't- it doesn't
However,
have to be
and
this,
I
like,
think this is what
brutal,
Kenny would say, is that
visceral
at the end of the
experience.
day, I have to be the one to go to physical therapy and to put in the work to make my legs work again. And it's tragic because, like, in a just world, in a better world, we could get that person to just like give me money to the point where my legs work again. But we don't exist in that world. And there needs to be some buy-in on my part as well. And so I think maybe that's the only distinction that Kenny's trying to make.
No, this is people also hammering your knees with ball peen hammers as well, because people are still racist right now, and those
Real
systems
quickly,
still
I
exist.
would like. I'm
Okay,
sorry. Real quickly, I'd like
I-
to apologize to Joe because I cut you off. That's all I want to say. I'm very sorry.
To Duma.
Duma.
Numa Joe, it's fine. My frustration
Okay.
is always that, and this is just what I believe. Like, I believe that economic conditions determine social conditions. You can do only so much to the individual, but if you don't put them in the right economic position to succeed in society that they're under, they're going to suffer. However, what we have is abject poverty in high concentrations in urban areas, and those urban areas are majority black. So what you're going to have to do de facto is actually embolden entire communities of people, not exclusively individuals. When there's this like liberal prioritization of the individual, we lose the issues that happen with the group at large. For example, for like even if we talk about something with like something that people are advocating for with student debt cancellation, we understand that higher degree programs yield better salaries. This is why doctors have incredible amounts of student loan debt. But are they include? Don't wiggle your fingers. I can give you like so much data on that your ears will bleed. Like don't. We can just admit that. We can just
go ahead.
We can just admit that to be true. That the higher, if you are in advanced
degree
program,
major.
if you are in advanced degree programs, you yield better salaries. This is why you hear the advocacy of doctors in math and STEM fields in certain communities of people. However, we can also understand that even though we can advocate for things like making sure that more black kids are in STEM programs, making sure that black kids are more competent in mathematics, we understand that there are racial gaps and inconsistencies in mathematics that make the success of black Americans incredibly insufficient. So then when it comes to, okay, what do we do about it? We understand that the teachers in these schools can be incredibly insufficient. These teachers are underfunded and under-resourced. Are they bad teachers because are they bad teachers, or are they bad teachers because are they under-resourced? Maybe we should research that and figure it out. Oh, we did, and we didn't do shit. Like the biggest problem that I've had in America is that the needs of racialized groups only matter when they intersect with whatever the status quo deems to be appropriate. This is why we got Stop Asian Hate. We got Stop Asian Hate, but there's no conversation about the wealth inequality among Asian Americans. They don't give a fuck about that. They don't give a fuck about Cambodians and their wealth disparities in the United States. They don't care about the wealth inequality of black people in the United States. But feel free to join the fucking military because you broke can more than happily go in there and advocate for a country that doesn't even have your back when you're back there as a civilian. Because have fun trying to get BA benefits as a black person. Because let me tell you, it is incredibly insufficient. And if you don't want to believe me as a civilian, I can give you so many former individuals in the armed services who can attest to that. Like, I am frustrated with rhetoric around individuals because it doesn't address the needs of communities. If we need to improve communities in the United States, improving the individual can only go so far if they go to communities and they go to cities, rural, urban, all types of different community structures that are insufficient for having a livelihood. I'm tired of having concentrations of minorities in the East and West Coast. There's so much, like, because if you're against land back, then you should definitely support fucking making sure that the Midwest is emboldened. But then even when we get situations like in Mason, Tennessee, where a black community is basically going to get absorbed by the legislature, we're not going to do shit about it.
I just think the locus of policy should be the individual, not the racial group. That's where
you're going to have to target the racial group by proxy because you're not going to get any legislation done if you don't do that. That's how bad the situation is, Kenny. I'm on board with you that we should probably move past that, but we're not there yet.
Right.
What's that?
Yeah. I said identity politics is real. You're absolutely right.
Do you believe that you have a different relationship with the social and political systems in society based on who you are? You are a white, I'm assuming middle class Asian American. White presenting, I should say. So you're white.
I'm white presenting?
Wait.
What?
What?
A white presenting age.
What the heck?
Let me rephrase that.
Can you look at me right now?
I can simplify that for you. I can simplify that for you if that upset you. You are an Asian American in the United States of decent wealth, college educated. Do you think those things influence your relationship with social, political, and economic systems in the United States?
No, I think defining white as wearing a suit and having a book is kind of gross.
Or being upper class.
Which is why I discarded white. Which is why I discarded white in the categorization. Are we going to sit on that, or can we move past it?
This is. I guess.
I'm asking the question. If you can't move past it, I can drop it.
I think that people have about critical race theory. Because
if we're hung up, we can move past it.
Now you're making assumptions about me. Now you're making assumptions about me solely based on what I look like. And you're not seeing me for the story that I can convey, for the actual person that I am. You're making assumptions about me.
And they do
And
it to
that's
black
the
people all the
worst part
time
about
too. It happens to both of us, friend.
is that it enhances the stereotype. It enhances stereotypes in society.
I agree.
It makes more racism in society.
I agree.
Okay? How would you like it if I came up to you and I said, you were black presenting? And because you were black presenting, I'm going to assume that society is against you.
I'm
How
black.
would you like that?
I'm black. It's very clear that I'm black. I have no problem with you saying that I'm a black American.
People in this country just want to be treated. Just want somebody to come up to them and just look at them in the eye and say, "What's your story?" And not assume anything about them based on what they look like, or especially the skin color that they present in.
Which is why I removed the white racial categorization. That was a misspeak, and I apologize for that. Which is why I clarified the statement and I asked, as an Asian American in the United States, do you believe that your invisible identifiers, all the things that make who you are, will influence how you interact in society, how you interact with politics, and how you interact in the economy? Do you believe that to be true?
No, I don't.
Why do you not believe that to be true?
Because my race doesn't mean jack crap to me.
I did not say. I
don't care about the fact that I'm Asian American. I don't give a Jiminy Cricket. Gosh darn it. And it doesn't affect the way that I view the world. It doesn't affect my intelligence. It doesn't affect the way that I try to talk to other people. Okay? You know what does?
I explicitly clarified.
Oh my God.
My personality, my sense of humor, my good looks, my disposition.
I explicitly said, because of your invisible identifiers, you're going to have different relationships with social, political, and economic systems. Do you agree with that statement?
No. I don't believe that.
No. So you do not believe that people have visible and invisible identifiers in America?
I don't even know what you mean by that.
A visible identifier is the fact that
Asian, yes.
That's a visible identifier. An invisible identifier could be something like it could be something like you are cis. It could be like something that you are trans. It could be like something that you have diabetes. It could be something like you have cancer. Those are invisible identifiers.
I would say that if it does, I would say that it's a lot more minute than how I present, than how I act, than how I talk to you, than how I first present myself to you. I think first impressions are a lot more than just about race.
Jangles, do you believe that your visible and invisible identifiers influence your relationship with social, political, and economic structures?
Yes.
Me too.
Jack? Merrick? Taft?
Absolutely.
To some extent. And I think the quibble will just be like, to what extent? That's like the whole argument, right?
Kevin?
Yeah, minutely. That's what I'm saying.
You just very quickly rephrase the question again. You're saying visible identifiers
you have
to
your visible and invisible identifiers influence your relationship in social, political, and economic structures.
To some extent, yes, but the question is, what do you do about it?
Sure, that's the perfect question. What do we do about these things? So we should probably educate individuals about how these things navigate, right? Like something that to give you some context as to why I said what I said to you, Kenny. So I want to apologize explicitly for saying white there. That was out of turn. It was out of turn, especially considering that the context of me saying that require a longer conversation than you and I have here right now. I want to recognize that and apologize. The concern that I have is that we understand that we have these relationships in society. As a Black American, my relationship with law enforcement is going to be different than Jangles. Your relationship with law enforcement is going to be different. We're all going to have different relationships with that. We're going to have different relationships in school. We're going to have different relationships with housing. All of these things are based on not only our visible identifiers, but our invisible. And there's different variations to that. Some individuals, because of their visible and invisible identifiers, don't have to worry about certain issues. However, some do. Like for me, statistically, I need to worry about being Black when interacting in schools, when interacting in the healthcare system, when interacting with banking, when interacting with the military. These are all things I have to consider. Now, does that mean that
would you like to live in a world where that wasn't true, Joe?
Does that? Of fucking course. I'm an anarchist. Like, I want to fucking burn this shit to the fucking ground.
Okay,
Respectfully.
I'm gonna give you a couple. I'm just gonna give you a couple counter statistics here, just because
I think
statistics
statistics do not.
I don't believe that,
Sure,
like the fact
sure.
that I'm Asian, like for example, somebody who has like, somebody. I get it. I'm the Asian. I get it. So, but I'm gonna give you a couple counter statistics here, just to like mess with that a little bit. So, under Susan Fisk's Princeton bias map, a stereotype map of warmth and competence, Black professionals get higher scores in warmth and competence than even whites do. Okay.
Great.
And
Black fathers
Asians
care more statistically for their children
so
than other
what I'm
racial
saying is
demographics.
that you know why? Because it's a difference in presentation. It's a different in presentational ability. Everything like that. Also, Black interactions with cops. I get this is a very sensitive issue. However, you need to understand
Speak
that
plainly.
cops
You can speak
do not
plainly here.
shoot Black Americans at a rate disproportionate to their violent crime. Okay? That's a fact.
We understand that
So
communities.
Black Americans commit about 50% of the violent, or 50% of the interactions, violent interactions.
We can move past these stats. Pausing them. I know these stats.
We gotta let him at least. I can't hear what he's saying.
I know these stats,
So
Kenny. What's your point?
behavior matters a lot more in these interactions. That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying race is no factor, but I'm saying behavior matters a lot more. That's what I'm saying.
You're 1350ing, bro.
Listen, and I understand your frustration with navigating. I understand it too as a Black American. I love my voice not being heard in conversations about race. It's been my life's work here on Twitch, where I'm on panels and I hear white people talk about Black people for hours. It's just what happens to Black people on panels. It's the same thing that happens to Asian Americans. It's the same thing that happens to Hispanic Americans. It happens all the time. But something that I'm concerned
Black
about.
people talking about white people a lot on panel.
Oh, you don't watch
We're
Black
talking
people,
about
so it's very hard for you to like elaborate on what that
Excuse
claim
me?
looks like.
I don't what?
Oh,
You don't watch Black content on Twitch.
He's gonna prove
Is
his
it a
streak
fair
cred.
Says
assessment?
who?
Oh fuck.
What do you mean black? I don't watch black content.
Black content.
How do you know
creators,
what I watch on Twitch?
specifically? Because statistically, most people don't.
Statistically.
You do?
So you're assuming
You do
what I
know?
watch
That's
based on
great. That's
statistics,
great. That's
based
great,
on
man.
the fact, like on my
we can
skin
move
color.
on. We can move on.
So
from
again,
that.
we're
We can
going
move
back
on
to like the racial stereotypes.
No, you baited
apologize
for
for that one
gotcha,
too?
and I took the bite. I took the bite. My point here is, because I'm trying to talk to Kenny here, is that I'm concerned about
I don't know if
the
he's doing a very good job
prioritization
here.
of the individual in your arguments. Because I think broadly speaking, you believe that communities should thrive and that communities should look out for each other. That's even what you said when you were on the bullpen explicitly. That why don't Black communities look after each other? Those were your words. So, and to a sentiment to that, I agree with you.
Landis?
Yeah, I read your book. It's shitty, but I read it. I still you have my money, and I hope you used it for something of value, my friend. Because the thing is, contrary to popular belief, I care about your opinion. What's that?
I do like you more because you read my book. Go ahead.
I care about your opinion because I understand that everybody is approaching these issues from different angles and advocating from these things in different angles. This is why I even express to you the original identifier that I gave you, contextually speaking, was out of line and inappropriate. But that being said, I do have a concern of your prioritization of the individual, because I think within your language and other public expressions, you said, well, maybe there is something that we should do about communities in the United States, like explicitly for schools, right? We understand that the federal government has kind of left schools up to themselves at the state level, but we can also recognize that there is a limit to how far the federal government should go in helping schools. There should be a limit to how far the state should go into helping schools, but by and large, it shouldn't be absolutely nothing. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. I mean, there's differences in liberal versus conservative opinion.
Sure.
My attack is really against CRT, which specifically says that we need to that it is a productive and healthy measure to trace our problems back to racism, or
Yeah, and
not just totally trace our
okay.
problems back.
And the last thing, and I'll table it, Kenny. Listen, if you want to,
we gotta move on. Just so many people who've been waiting. Kevin has been waiting for 30 minutes.
Yeah, it's like 10 seconds. If you want to chop shop after for a little bit, if you have time to clear the air, I'm more than down to do that. I did not mean to offend you in the face that I did, because I definitely could tell that hit you in a place that's really close at home. I've seen that happen to you in different discussions. So if you want to chop shop after, I'm more than down to do that.
Okay, so I'm gonna
Sure.
throw it to Kevin Castley. We have Kevin Castley, Jangles, Jake, and then Jangles again. I guess Jangles has really been waiting.
I can't believe I'm
So
third
we'll
on
start
that
with
list still. Holy
Yeah, thanks,
shit.
Dylan. So I know
Jesus
there's just
fucking
a really
Christ.
intense discussion there, but I kind of want to bring it back because there are a lot of CRT panels on Twitch. So this comes up from time to time. I want to throw it back to Trump's comments. I want to bring this back to Trump specifically. I just want to note here just how unbelievably ridiculous and grotesque his statements about how he wants his 23 to 40%, whatever you want to take it, of the US population to go out there and lay down their lives. In other words, basically, if you want to be charitable, protest. If we want to interpret it the way I think he's getting at, riot against schools teaching. Again, he's not talking about graduate school CRT stuff, which I've actually debated against. I'm not really a fan of like the CRT.
Kenny and Kevin mixed up. These guys are both
about
wearing suits.
objectivism,
You're face blind.
all that type
Truly
of stuff. But he's
colorblind. You
doing
only
it
see
based on
suits.
the meme of it.
Yeah,
well,
those are,
the thing is,
don't
and
like
he's
that.
appealing to patriotism and he's appealing to nationalism.
Yeah, he wants to talk about
I
Trump.
just want to
I don't
know
care
for
about
the
this.
record here, there's an excellent book that I would suggest that everybody reads.
Is it his?
It's called The
Do you think it's
Room
his
Where
book?
It Happened by Donald Trump's former national
No.
security advisor. So a
It's
guy
not
that
his
he
book.
picked, the guy who he hired, John Bolton, who says that during the G20 summit in Japan, Donald Trump basically asked President Xi Jinping, the dictator of China, to help him rig the 2020 election. So for all the conservatives and everybody out there that think that, like, oh yeah, this is your guy, he's gonna stand up to China or whatever, no, he's not. And on this, he's just basically driving this wedge issue that he doesn't really particularly understand to try to amplify his own cult of personality, because there's no serious discussion about CRT there. It's just, can you believe it? They're implying that you're all racist or whatever, that sort of thing. To the point, though, and just very quickly here, to the point
Camera
about
goes off, but
what
we
Kenny
don't
was
get
saying
muted.
earlier about how Asian success within the United States kind of disproves the notion that America's racist. I wouldn't consider America racist, but I would say that there are a lot of people in the US that are racist, just as there are a lot of people in Canada that are racist. But I guess my question to Kenny would be, how would you how would you describe, or what would you say would kind of be the cause, I guess, of the hate that was directed to the Asian community in the wake of the issue that we can't talk about on YouTube, the virus that happened? So, because there was a lot of hate directed towards Asians from, various ethnic groups within the US. So.
Kenny, I believe that was directed towards you.
Yeah.
I couldn't hear any of it. I'm sorry. Could you repeat the question?
Sure. Yeah, no, I was just asking. So
I still can't hear you, so I can't respond.
I can
Keep moving. I don't know
ask the question. He was basically asking. Can you hear
Yeah.
me? Okay. He was
Yeah, I
asking
can hear
about
you.
what would you say about the amount of the spike in violence against Asian Americans and hate crimes against
Yeah.
Asian Americans following the virus that shall not be named for advertiser purposes.
Yeah. No, I understand. Look, attacks against Asians did increase in 2020. It also increased for every other racial group. Okay. And you need to understand that attacks against Asians did not increase. I think the media likes to paint a white supremacist picture on that, but that's not true, because in 2018, the latest data that we have, Asians are attacked. The perpetrators are 28% black, 25% white.
Trump's
The rest
comments
are
on CRT
Hispanic and other
weighing down
Asians.
your
So
lives.
it's not a white supremacist narrative. It doesn't
Related.
fit a white supremacist narrative to say it's largely whites attacking Asians or right-wingers attacking Asians or anything like that. Do I think that Trump made it helped by calling it the China virus? No, I don't think he helped by calling it the China virus. I wouldn't have done it myself. But to say that that's the primary cause of the increase in violence is, to me, facially ridiculous.
Do you think that was fucked up, though?
What do you mean?
Do you think that Donald Trump
That
shouldn't
Trump
have
called
said
it
that? Yeah, do you think that's a little fucked up, though? No?
I mean, on a scale of
Doesn't matter what
on
the
a
scale
scale
is,
of
it's fucked up. Does it reach
my
that?
bad to 10, it's the worst thing in the world.
It's not the worst thing in the world,
I
it's
would
just
say it's
fucked up. Why do
No,
we
I
have
would
to?
say
We
it's
don't
like a
have to deal
five.
in
I would say
extremes
it's
for
a
this. It could just be bad. Did you do a bad thing?
I see. I said it was bad. I said it was wrong.
But
What do
is
you
it
want me to
fucked
say?
up,
It's
though?
wrong.
Like, it's like, I wouldn't do that. It seems very like, I take it or leave it. But like,
I've
he
given
does
you my
harmful
exact
shit like
number
that, man.
position.
I don't know. Like, do you consider this him saying, "Hey, everyone should lay down their life for this"? Do you think that's a bad thing? Like a bad thing?
I know.
Like, this is
I need to see
bad
the
for
context on
America.
that. I haven't
The
seen it.
context? What do you mean? This was
I
this
need to see the
topic that was sent to all of us.
You didn't watch the video?
What the fuck?
It was. I think I would have to double check.
It's
it
only
might
like
have just
a
been in
minute
the
long.
Discord.
Nonetheless, Donald Trump
Yeah, it
said
was in the
it's the
Discord.
topic we've been talking about.
He is in the Discord.
Yeah.
No, we need to lay down our lives in that thing.
Is that
yeah,
bad?
No, I mean, what? Has no president ever said lay down your lives for your country?
Is that
Not
no-
for
no-
to defend CRT, brother? Come on, bro. We're not talking about a war.
Okay, one second. There's
To me,
multiple
this
people
is a
talking
big
about.
deal. It really is.
Christ.
Sorry, guys.
Slime,
Okay, we
bro.
got it. We are actually going over time, so I do want to get it to the people who have yet to talk. Jangles and Jake are the last two on the list. Then we're gonna do outros where everybody can shout themselves out, everything like that. Kenny, I am interested at some point. If I'm gonna see if I can get a hold of your book, I can read it, and then we can talk about it at some point in the future, if that would be possible.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Wonderful. What's wrong with that, Jake?
No, I'm sorry. I thought it was.
Hey, Jake, when's the last time?
He hasn't.
Jimmy,
dude.
what's the last
It's
book
happened
you
all
read?
night.
No. I
Yeah,
mute and then you mute me and then I unmute. Anyway, can I just share this? I think everyone will think this is funny. Everyone, there's just a little levity, and then we can move on to whatever. Anyway,
Okay,
so you know how Twitch has permitted terms things in your thing. One of my mods just permitted the term "hit every white." Anyway, it made me. It's fucking funny. I don't know.
Hit every way, every single one.
It was out of
Jangles,
context, just really
you're
funny.
next.
Jangles, that's me. All right, cool. Kenny, I really don't want to. I'm sorry that you're getting picked on a lot. That's just what it is. Like when you're like the largest dissenting voice on a panel. I promise. There's nothing personal, and yet it takes balls to be that lone dissenting voice. Right? So, I'm saying you that because I'm going to tell you that it seems like your
I
argument.
think
is-
other
got me
people
good.
have dissented too. Don't.
Yeah, a
give
little
credit
bit,
to
And
other
I've
people.
been in your
Obviously, it's been,
position.
like,
I've
targeted.
7v1. I've been 7v1 on Afghanistan before. It happens.
I know. Yeah, it's
I've been
not
involved.
fun. I say that because I am going to say like it
What's
seems like
your-
your argument is that
What are you
like
saying?
it seems like your argument is that America can't be racist against black people if Asians are doing good. It's like it's like if someone accused you of being racist against black people, you'd say like, no, I have an Asian friend. That doesn't seem very convincing to me personally. Second,
No,
I'm
I'm
trying to run through
saying-
these quick. I'm gonna try to run through these quick. Sorry. So why is racism bad? I think there's two views you can take. Like it's bad because it's bad, like it's intrinsically bad, which I think we all hopefully agree with. But it's also bad because it causes bad outcomes. So remember when Toptech brought up like Kindy's book and like anti-racist laws. Like racism is also bad because it causes racist outcomes. It causes those disparities and everything from like education to economic status. Like that's one reason it's bad, and that we have to look at that as well.
Kenny's
And,
scuffed box
third point,
fan.
I'm going through these. So meritocracy and individual responsibility.
Kenny, your
and
gaming
focusing on
computer's fan is going nuts.
meritocracy and individuality and all that fun stuff is great, but when it becomes your primary framework for like the world, like if you assume that America is a meritocracy and everyone gets what they deserve, well then you start
Fucking
looking at
MacBook.
groups that aren't doing so well and you start working backwards. So a lot of
Sims
people think
2
that like
on it.
racism is like it's the racism first and then the bad outcomes, but if you look at it through a lens of like system justification theory, when you
Venture
see groups that
capitalist,
aren't
the
doing
clicker
good,
game.
and in your head you think everyone will, can make it
Adventure
ahead if they
capitalist.
really work at it. Well, then you start to work backwards and wonder why are certain groups doing bad if they have every opportunity available to them? Must be something wrong with that group. So it's actually like a self-perpetuating thing. Black people are not doing great because of systemic racism, and now that they're not doing great, and we believe in meritocracy. Well, now we work backwards and say that well, there must be a reason that black people are doing bad, even though they have every opportunity. I wonder what that could be. So, and the big thing. Way back in the beginning, to find like America's a racist nation. One thing I will point out that I think is a really strong proponent of that is that the year 2042 is my strongest argument for why.
Dude,
America's
are a bunch
still
of people
racist
leaving
nation.
the other
This is
stream
the
and
year
coming
that
here
that
because
whites are
we've slowly been
supposed to be
gaining
a
folks?
Minority. We're still a plurality, but we're going to be a minority. And if given that information, white people
Like,
will
people
almost
can tell the
always
vibe
experience
here.
some sort of group status threat. If color didn't matter,
Yeah,
if racism was over, and
we
America
got
was not
some
a racist
fucking
nation, the notion that America would
we got
become
like a
minority
very
white
serious
would not
crew
matter,
tonight,
but
you
it
know what I
does,
mean?
and it does consistently in study after study. Like the more
Very,
if
like,
you prime white people with that knowledge,
wear a
suddenly
suit
they
to the
become
fucking
a lot more
podcast.
conservative. Suddenly they become a lot more.
Bro, I got
opposed to
high. I
welfare.
smoked on stream
Suddenly
right
they
before
become
we went
a lot
live, bro.
more sensitive to anti-white racism. racism.
going
And all
after
of that
this.
is just primed with the knowledge
I'll let
that
you
America
guys
will become
talk me into.
eventually
I'm a little sleepy, but I'll let you guys talk me
into.
into.
I don't see how we can reconcile
Gordo
the fact that is
with
true.
you
That
know,
It's
America
the
one
Britney
per
from
level of hype
politically
train.
provoked effect.
One per level of the hype train.
Yeah, there
That's
you
what
go.
we do.
The
I'm
Little
sleepy.
Tim-
I don't.
Little Timmy.
Oh,
Instantly turns
Okay,
you into
so
an
we
odd.
do-
And I'm not
gotta-
saying that like
Okay.
racism doesn't have to be
Okay,
like
we gotta- savage.
Jangles, we do
Yeah.
gotta wrap it up.
All right, cool. All right. Well,
Okay.
racism doesn't have to be hating everybody. It could just be a apprehension that the status quo is going to change.
Kenny, a lot of that was directed towards you. If you want to respond to it, I'll give you an opportunity. Quick.
Yeah, okay, fine. I'll respond just like a couple things. One, even if you said
Possible
that
Gordo
whites
after party.
disproportionately
Possible.
own power
I'll let you-
in this
I'll let you-
country,
I'll
you're
let you talk
still
me
only
into it.
referring actually to a subset
I'm a little
of
sleepy
whites.
though, and I have some.
You're not referring to all whites.
D&D stuff to do tomorrow.
Most whites don't own much power in this
You guys
country.
really, really.
We all
want to.
know
Well,
that. It's a subset of people, a subset of an
We'll talk a
elite
little bit about this
that
after
own a
the
lot
podcast.
of power
Give
in
you
this
some
country
time.
who happen to be disproportionately white. There are blacks in there, by the way. There are also Asians in there. But this is why the critical race theory
Biting
critique
time till
falls
Gordo?
apart,
Fuck.
because they try to put it on white
said, it says
society.
Gordo
But
bounty,
it's not
so.
white society. It's a subset of largely disproportionately white people. But then other whites, even if you're examining this from a liberal angle,
All 14
are
words?
being harmed. There's a ton of poor whites in this country. The divorce rates among whites are increasing. The educational attainment among whites are flatlining. There are parts of white America that are just being wiped out right now in this country. So this is why specifically a racial analysis, to me,
I can fix that.
falls apart. And so that's my main thing with all of the discourse that's going on. This is why I say Americans disprove critical race theory. The Asian Americans don't disprove racism. They disprove critical race theory, because critical race theory pits divisions in class and structure upon race, but the divisions are not necessarily because of race. They're not even majorly because of race. That's the argument.
Okay, now we have one last speaker, and that is Jake. Before we end the show, everybody will have ending statements and be able to shout out whatever they want to shout out. Jake?
Yeah, sure. Man, I've been waiting for so long, and I forgot most of the stuff I was gonna say. That's okay though. I don't know. It seems to me that you don't support things that would target different communities that are negatively affected by the systemic injustices that they face throughout the history of this country, irrespective of the severity of those things, because some other people succeed and face similar aspects. How do you feel about, because I have a way to fix this that would not be based on race. It wouldn't be based on any sort of your demographic makeup. It's just if you live here at all. And that would be, of course, everything of all these problems, really, would at least be helped, if not totally fixed. Decommodify survival necessities, my dudes. Decommodify rental. Like you should. Every American should have access to shelter. This automatically gets rid of a lot of income disparity, right? I'm not saying you can't buy a house or something, but basic shelter should be a dignified shelter. Should be a basic thing that every American has access to. I believe, of course, everyone in the world should have access to that, but we have to live within our limits. You should also decommodify education, because people in America should be able to pursue whatever they want, irrespective of the financial success of their parents. It's not true freedom if you don't have the ability to go and pursue whatever vocation you think is suitable for you, if only under the circumstances where you can afford to do so, right? We should decommodify things like basic food. Everyone should have access to nutrition, because we're the greatest country in the world, goddammit. That greatest country in the world should also offer healthcare for all of its citizens, because even under capitalism, you want to make sure that all the workers, all the labor force have places that they can go and be safe. And then when they go and work, right, if they get hurt on the job, they can go get health care, and you don't have people under stress. Fewer stressful workers increases productivity. It makes everything go burr, dude. Like none of this has anything to do with race at all, but it solves all of these systemic problems one by one. And then what has to happen after that, the valid facets of the discussion about racism in America and elsewhere, is that you have to understand people's perspectives and understand the different things that, like, you don't really know about day to day. It's not just about the big stuff, right? It's not just about income inequality. It's not just about people couldn't fucking marry who they wanted within some of our grandparents' lifetimes. My mom was 10 years old when civil rights happened, right? That's crazy. So we can address more than this, and it's not just about that. But like CRT is like some aspects of talking about racism is important. How people like I have a black friend, but I did a podcast with a good friend of mine, and he taught me a lot about his experience as a black guy because I'm a white guy. I'm like boat shoes white, right?
I would say you're white presenting, yeah.
Yeah, I'd say so. So like I learned so much about just like the little stuff about society that like you can't legislate around, but you have to talk about it as a society to even address the way that like black folks sometimes have to worry about where they take their phones out, walking around their own neighborhood at night, like what they're wearing, how they talk to people, especially how they talk to white people. Like these are not non-issues. And it has to be discussed. These aren't things that we can just say, okay, we ban CRT. These things still happen, and I would think that you would agree if someone faces social prejudice for something innate about them that has nothing to do with their character, I think you would agree that that person's ability to succeed in what I assume you would like to be a meritocracy in America would be impeded if they're not able to participate in the same way that someone without those hurdles in the way, social hurdles, would experience. You know what I mean? Maybe you disagree entirely, but
okay. So, Kenny, did you want to respond to that or no?
Yeah. I mean, look, I agree. Yeah, of course. Meritocracy means that we should treat people just on what they can contribute, not on the basis of immutable characteristics. This is why I support things like race-blind admissions, race-blind hiring practices. This is why I support things like get rid of the name on the application, get rid of the name on the resume, stop legacy admissions, those kinds of things. I believe in a true meritocracy. I just think that if you want to accomplish a true meritocracy, you have to start doing it.
Can you achieve a true meritocracy if people aren't all at the same standard of living?
I mean, you have to create equal opportunity. That's why I believe in a public education system. I've never said anything contrary to that.
Sure. What about?
I think that you need a public education system that equally distributes resources. But as we know, resources alone doesn't make good schools.
If America wasn't a racist nation, why would getting rid of names on applications?
Terrible.
That's a great question.
That's a great question.
What are you saying?
Okay.
We're out of time.
He said if America wasn't a racist nation, then why would we need to get rid of the names on applications?
No, I mean...
Oh, that's actually a good
That's a great question. Yeah, a meritocracy, that's the point. But you're admitting that there's bias when it comes to...
Wait.
I'm not saying that racism doesn't exist. I'm saying you guys are clearly concerned with racism in America. And even though look, I'm concerned with racism in America too, just maybe not in the way that you are. But to satisfy both of our concerns, let's just eliminate race on applications. Let's just eliminate names on applications. That's what I'm saying.
But
okay,
that's a fine step.
We got to wrap up.
I would love to have an extra talk here.
Well, you can message him on his own time, and you can schedule it. I'm sure he would love to talk to each and every one of you for 10 hours at a time. Now, I want to first thank the anonymous gifter who gifted 20 subs earlier. And I also want to thank today's sponsor of today's program, Surfshark VPN. If you had a moment on a panel where you called a random person who is a member of a minority group, white passing, maybe next time the government and everyone else won't see you if you're using Surfshark VPN. And you can use code DBTV for 82% off and the first 3 months free. Isn't that an amazing deal? Again, that is code DBTV, Surfshark, VPN. Any gifted subs, donations, anything Prime subs, which cost no money if you connect with the Amazon Prime account, to support the channel is greatly appreciated. We're now going to go into outros. Takes time to put all this together, and we will see you guys next week for the Hippy Dippy Roundtable. Now everybody's going to have their outros. I'm going to start with Taft.
Your boys last again.
Yeah, Taftage. Follow me on Twitter or Twitch. I post dumb shit on both. but more NSFW stuff on Twitter, so be careful there. More political opinions on Twitch. Yeah, fun stuff. Good memes. Thanks, everybody.
Wonderful. I'm going to throw it now over to Kevin Castley.
Yeah, thanks, Don. So just to kind of wrap up this topic here, so very quickly, I think, as far as it relates to CRT and everything, I wouldn't regard America as a racist country, but I'd say that there's a lot of people in the U.S. and Canada as well that are racist. I think that on the point about Trump, point about his statements here, grotesque. To all the conservatives out there that are still a fan of this guy and everything, seriously, read Bolton's book. You'll see this guy's a stooge of the country you want to fight against, China. So, and he asked for, Xi Jinping's help to literally undermine your democracy. So, it's probably time to wake up and not risk your life for a guy who just cares about his own credit from Russia, basically, in his golf courses. So, I'm Kevin Castley. I stream 7 days a week to Twitch and upload the content to YouTube. And you can follow me at Superpower Broadcasting. Follow me on Twitter at Kevin Castley. And I'll be doing a post show on my channel on Twitch in about 15 minutes or so if you want to come and hang out there. It's been a good debate. And I also debate one-on-one. If you're interested in debating me, shoot me a DM. We can set something up. Yeah, it's been fun.
Happy to have you. I am now going to throw it over to Merrick.
Yeah, this is I'm surprised. I feel like this was not nobody screamed at anyone else. That was good. That was cool. This is the most fun I've had on a panel since Hake said that infrastructure was a communist buzzword. So I really enjoyed being here. I think it was really fun. And I'm sorry, Kevin. I feel like, or I'm sorry, not Kevin. I'm sorry, Kenny. I feel like we just kind of all beat up on you all night. So I hope that there's no hard feelings. I feel like, there's a lot of teaming up on you. But I think that we had some interesting back and forths. And yeah, this was really cool. I am Merrick DeVille. You can find my friend, Punished Mother, on Twitter. And then I have a YouTube and a Twitch that we very erratically stream on. We try to do it regularly. So yeah, thank you so much for having me, Dylan. If you guys have a Prime sub on Twitch, please give it to Dylan. And Taftaj didn't mention this, but someone in my chat mentioned this. She is actually shadow banned on Twitter because she's a sex worker. So if you try to look her up, please put in the whole @, because someone in my chat just tried to do that and they couldn't do it. So yeah, there you go.
No worries. I'm also shadow banned on Twitter, not for being a sex worker, just for being sexy.
So true,
Dylan. I'm going to
Dylan.
throw it over to last username.
Yeah, so this went about as well as most discussions on CRT, and kind of illustrates my point that CRT is largely about just getting away from any kind of specific solutions to any specific problems, and just taking a look at all these problems of the past. And so these problems of the past are all still problems.
Solutions? Am I crazy?
They're still here. They will be here forever.
Am I losing my fucking mind?
Never solve these old problems.
Didn't I say that? I just fixed
everything
those
is
problems.
racist. There's racism everywhere. Like whites, systemic racism is an interesting idea.
He tuned out when I started talking.
But the way it's used is just to basically say that it's everywhere, and there's very little rigor applied to actually quantifying it or measuring it or verifying these hypotheses. It's just everything is, it's in the courts and the police and the schools. It's in the mathematics. It's in climate change. It's just everywhere, and there's so little rigor put into it, and there's little effort to solve problems. It seems like the people who are into CRT are not into solving problems. They're just into saying that
CRT is one of
that
it's like high level
that
shit,
racism
dude.
is everywhere.
Oh my god!
And it sabotages solving problems. That's the problem with it. And today we couldn't even get CRT defined. So anyway, I tried. And thank you guys for, I guess, trying with me. And I guess better luck next time. So last username, you can check out my Twitch channel or Econarchy on YouTube. And good to be here.
Okay, I'm going to throw it over to Kenny.
Critical race theory, if it's not false, it's a bad mode of analysis. It misses way too many nuances. It pits people division together, and it enhances racial stereotypes, all of which are bad. So that's my point on critical race theory. Other than that, I really enjoyed this discussion. Really enjoyed the time here. Didn't know exactly what to expect, but I've always been this kind of guy. Always been this kind of voice. So if you want to hear more repudiations of if you want to hear more repudiations of some of the things that that Jangles brought up, and everything like that. If you want to hear more arguments for colorblindness, if you want to hear my thoughts on meritocracy, and if you want to, of course, see why Asians disprove CRT, follow my Twitter at Kenny M. Shu, XU, Kenny M. XU, and buy my book, An Inconvenient Minority, which has arguments to all of these premises.
Okay. I want to throw it over to... Oh, also, I do want to bring up the fact that Don Young, I think the oldest member of Congress, actually died today. And so I didn't bring it up at any point during today's show. So I just wanted to repeat my favorite Don Young story, even though he's a Republican. He once was interacting with Bower, the former, I believe, House Minority or Majority Leader, I forget which, for the Republican Party. And Bower said that Young once pinned him against a wall in the House during an argument over earmarks. And Don Young, took out a 10-inch knife and put it to Bower's throat. And they responded by staring him in the eyes and saying, "Fuck you." Young confirmed the account as mostly true to Politico, but pointed out that he and Bower later became such good friends that Bower was the best man at his wedding. People can say that I turn debate into wrestling, but Congress has done that a long time ago. I'm going to throw it over to Jangles.
Thank you so much for that very interesting story before you throw it over to me to put everyone back to sleep. Well, I've been Justin. I had a lot of fun. I missed coming on the panel, so thank you so much for inviting me. Yeah, that's about how CRT panels go, but I think the other two topics were a lot more. I think they were pretty productive. I think we made our cases pretty well. I guess for my final two arguments on that topic, regarding Kenny's argument that since a lot of white people are very, very poor, I would propose the question to the audience that did poor people exist before the civil rights movement? And does that mean that America was not a white supremacist nation then? And I would also like to assuage some fears for the people who are concerned about critical race theory, that if our kids are indoctrinated into believing that America is inherently evil, once they grow up, they can become individuals who can decide to make better personal choices. So hopefully that'll alleviate some fear.
Okay, I'm going to throw it over to Duma.
Yeah, listen. So before I take my 2-week vacation for my comments on the internet, I do want to say it lives up to my Twitter handle, which is sometimes I will sacrifice optics for engagement. So maybe I'll take that out for this one. This is a lot of fun. I do miss having conversations with people on the internet, so it's nice to kind of get back in the swing of that. I had a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes, so we're kind of back at this. Obviously, for sake of transparency, me and last username need to fight, especially since now I self-ID as an anarchist now. We gotta chop and see where we disagree on things. So I still owe you a conversation. So invitations out, Kenny, if you have maybe 10 minutes, I'd like to talk to you after.
Saying? I thought it was talk
Jake,
shop.
it's always fun. Jangles, it's always fun. Merrick's always fun. Taft, I still didn't forget about. I feel like I responded to your message, and my brain is very made of spaghetti. So if I didn't, I apologize. I was making note that I'm always down the chop with everybody. I suck at panels. It's very clear. Why do you think they never call me up unless we're talking about race issues? But with that being said, you can find me on Twitter and Twitch. Right now it's twitch.tv/Dumadamu.
Yeah, Chop Shop is a place in my head.
DAMU. Otherwise, this was a lot of fun. You're all fantastic. And also, listen, Kevin, don't change, okay? Keep on keeping on. I'll see you when I'm up in Toronto in a couple of months, okay? Or wherever you are.
See, the thing is, Canada is a pretty big place. I live further away from Toronto.
No, you don't. No, you don't. It's only Toronto.
Everybody's in Toronto.
All of Canada, yes. We're going to now throw it over to Jake to close us out.
Oh boy. I'm pretty sure we gave both the definition of CRT and some solutions. And I guess I don't know what a meritocracy means if it's defined by success under capitalism. like it doesn't seem to make people who are proficient necessarily rise to the top, and it seems to sometimes make people that aren't proficient rise to the top. I think some celebrities that exist are a great example of this. Not to say that people don't get to like stuff like that, like entertainers or whatever. Like Kim Kardashian can make money or whatever, but like I don't see how these are necessarily refutive of like anything, any of the lefties on here. Like, I don't know, you didn't really disagree with the stuff in general. It's just sort of like talking about the topics. Anyway, if you like lefty stuff and clearly a little bit more, frankly, I come across as terribly unprofessional in this group, and that's kind of fine with me. It's a little bit different vibe over here. Yeah, I'm more of a hoodie guy than a suit guy, but I gotta say, the two in suits today, it's not a bad look. We've had some people on suits on these panels that, like, not good. So I appreciate you. It's the casual undershirt there, I think, that does it for me. But
he's right. You guys look good.
Yeah,
it's very true.
Looking good. It's a good looking crew tonight. I think we did okay. Anyway, thanks for having me on. You can find me at Actual Jake over here. Love to talk to if anyone wants to stick around after this. I'm still talkative, so
Awesome.
it wouldn't be moderated though.
I've only gotten 3 hours of sleep, so I'm gonna go pass out. You all have a blessed one, and have a good weekend. And call your grandparents if they're alive.
Yeah, have a good weekend, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, buddy.
Good
Have a
night,
good one.
guys.
Good night.
Stay base.